At 74, Ruth Mercer stood beneath the green awning of the Crestview extended stay with one suitcase, 6 plastic storage bins, and a dying fern Claire had insisted was still worth saving. Claire kept the engine running. "I paid through next Thursday," she said, leaning across the passenger seat. "That gives us 10 days to figure everything out." "Us," Ruth repeated. "I have to meet the movers. You know how they are if nobody watches them." Ruth did not know how they were. She had never hired movers. When she and Frank had changed houses 38 years earlier, they had done it with a borrowed truck, 3 neighbors, and sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Claire glanced at the bins lined up beside the soda machine. "Daniel will call you tonight." "No, he won't." "Mom?" It was the tone Claire used when Ruth misremembered an appointment or put recycling in the wrong container. Ruth had begun hearing it before she had actually done anything wrong. Claire reached into her handbag and handed her a blue folder. On top was a brochure showing 2 silver-haired women laughing over a jigsaw puzzle. "Just look at the options." Then she drove away with Ruth's winter coat still hanging behind the driver's seat. Ruth watched the taillights disappear and wondered which of her children had first realized that neither of them intended to take her. The motel clerk came outside after a minute. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a purple tie and the apologetic expression of someone approaching roadkill. "Ma'am, you checking in? Unless the Fern has a reservation." He looked at the Fern, then at her. "I can get a cart." "That would be kind." The cart had one bad wheel and squealed each time it turned. Ruth and the clerk stacked the bins carefully, although Claire had packed them as if shipping canned goods through a war zone. Kitchen, mom, bath, mom, important papers, clothes, cold weather. The labels were printed in Claire's neat block letters. The winter coat would have gone in that last bin if Claire had not told Ruth she was being ridiculous. It was September. Nobody needed a wool coat in September. Room 117 smelled of lemon cleaner, damp carpet, and something fried long ago. There was a bed with a brown coverlet, a desk attached to the wall, 1 wooden chair, and a kitchenette containing 2 burners. A laminated card warned that cooking fish would result in a $75 cleaning charge. The clerk set the Fern by the window. "You need anything else?" "My daughter says I need assisted living." His eyes went immediately to the blue folder in Ruth's hand. "That wasn't a request," she said. He relaxed. "Front desk has coffee until 10. It isn't good, but it's determined." That surprised a laugh out of her. His name tag said Leonard. He pointed to the phone and explained how to reach him, though the instructions were printed directly on it. Ruth let him. People liked to finish the kindness they had prepared. When he left, the room became very quiet. Ruth opened the blue folder. Claire had arranged the brochures by monthly price and marked 3 with yellow tabs. Pleasant Grove, Senior Community offered supportive independence beginning at $4,850 a month. Willow Haven included transportation to shopping centers on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Suncrest Lodge had a beauty salon, scheduled games, and a photograph of a dining room where every table seated 4 smiling people who looked as though they had been threatened into good health. A sticky note on the front read, "Best balance of safety and affordability." Ruth found Claire's arithmetic on a legal pad. The proceeds from the old house, Ruth's Social Security, Frank's small pension, estimated years of coverage, estimated years. She closed the folder. Her phone rang at 6:16. She looked at Daniel's name until the screen went dark, then immediately hated herself for not answering. He called again. "Hey, Ma," he said. There was traffic behind him. "You get settled?" "I'm at a motel, Daniel. Settled is generous. I know. It's a mess." "You said I could stay with you if Claire's move happened before we found a place." "I said we'd work something out." "No, you said I could stay with you." A horn sounded through the phone. Daniel swore at somebody, then returned with a softer voice. "Lena's place is tiny. I'm there most nights now. The landlord watches everything. Your apartment has 2 bedrooms. The second one is the office." "Of course." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "That little 'of course' thing." Ruth sat on the only chair, the desk edge pressed into her stomach. "When would be a good weekend for me to be homeless?" "You're not homeless." Claire paid for the room. "Until Thursday. We have 10 days. There it was again. We. Daniel told her he had 2 service calls backed up and promised to come the next afternoon. Ruth knew his promises by weight. This one was made of tissue paper. Bring my gray cardigan, she said. Claire packed it in the trunk of your car last month. I'll look, and don't ask me about the loan. He went silent just long enough to prove he had planned to. I wasn't going to. All right, I just need a little room until the commercial accounts catch up. No. Ma, I didn't even ask. You were clearing your throat toward it. He laughed to spite himself. Daniel had Frank's laugh, sudden and boyish, a sound that could still loosen something in her before she had time to defend herself. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. Ruth ended the call and placed the phone face down. She ate peanut butter crackers over the kitchenette sink. There were only 4 in the package, and she divided them as if another person might need 2. At home, at Claire's house, she corrected herself. She had done the grocery shopping every Wednesday. Claire liked Greek yogurt, but only the vanilla kind, and she complained if Ruth bought the cups with fruit on the bottom. Ruth had learned the preferences of everyone she loved until their lives moved around her without friction. She had mistaken that frictionlessness for belonging. The next day, Daniel texted at 4:30. Emergency call. Tomorrow, for sure. Claire called from the new state and spoke brightly about the moving truck arriving without damage. She asked whether Ruth had toured Willow Haven online. I've been busy, Ruth said. With what? Ruth looked around room 117. The fern had dropped a leaf. Settling. On the second day, Ruth opened the bins because she needed a clean blouse. Claire had packed 3 casserole dishes, Frank's chipped coffee mug, 2 framed photographs, a hand mixer, bath towels, Ruth's tax returns, and a silver gravy boat nobody had used since 2009. She had not packed Ruth's rain shoes, phone charger, prescription refill, or the small sewing kit Ruth kept in the kitchen drawer. Claire had packed the evidence of a mother, not the requirements of a woman. Ruth bought a charger at the pharmacy across the highway. The walk required crossing 6 lanes of traffic, while a white walking signal counted backward with insulting speed. She reached the opposite curb at 0 and stood there breathing hard, furious with the road, her knees and Claire's certainty that safety could be purchased in a residence with watercolor classes. Daniel did not come that day either. On the 3rd morning, Leonard knocked with a paper cup of coffee. You missed the good stuff, he said. You told me it wasn't good. This is worse. Night shift made it. He noticed the untouched bedspread. Ruth had been sleeping on top of it under a thin blanket from one of the bins. You want housekeeping? No, thank you. They can change that cover. It's clean. I didn't say it wasn't clean. He had the tact to stop there. Before leaving, he told her the diner across the road served a breakfast special until 11. Ruth waited until he was gone, then looked at herself in the mirror. She had worn the same beige slacks for 2 days. Her white hair, normally shaped and sprayed, had flattened on one side. She resembled a woman who would be grateful for watercolor classes. She changed her clothes. The Sunset Diner had red vinyl booths repaired with silver tape, and a glass case containing pies tall enough to require structural permits. A waitress with iron-gray curls approached carrying a pot of coffee. Sit anywhere except booth 6, she said. Booth 6 has emotional problems. Ruth looked at the empty booths. How can I tell which one is 6? You sit down and your left hip gets wet. Ruth chose a table near the window. The waitress's name tag said Marisol. She poured coffee without asking and slid a menu across the table. You staying at the Crestview? Is it that obvious? You have the look. What look is that? Like you own decent towels but can't currently find them. Ruth looked up. Marisol's expression was neither pitying nor nosy. It was simply accurate. My daughter packed them, Ruth said. They're in a box under the silver gravy boat. Marisol nodded as if this explained a category of disaster she had seen before. Eggs? 2 over medium? Wheat toast? Potatoes? I shouldn't. That wasn't the question. Potatoes. When the plate came, Ruth realized she was hungry enough to resent the time required to chew. Marisol returned whenever the coffee dropped below half a cup. She did not ask why Ruth was at the motel until Ruth had eaten 1 egg and most of the potatoes. House repairs? Marisol asked. No house. Divorce? Widowed? Visiting? Abandoned, apparently. The word landed between them with more force than Ruth intended. At the next table, a man in a paint-stained shirt turned a newspaper page. Marisol rested the coffee pot against her hip. How old are the fools? My children are 49 and 46. So old enough to know motels are for affairs and plumbing emergencies. Ruth nearly smiled. Claire calls it Transitional housing. Of course she does. She's not cruel. The defense came automatically. She took me in after Frank died. How long? 4 months. And what did you do while she was taking you in? Ruth buttered the corner of her toast. The normal things. Marisol waited. Cooking, errands, a little work for her office. A little. It wasn't indentured servitude. Didn't say it was. Ruth disliked her for understanding too quickly. She told Marisol she had money from selling the family home, enough for a sensible apartment if she was careful. She did not mention the legal pad calculating her remaining years. She did mention that Daniel's business was struggling, then heard how it sounded and stopped. Marisol carried the check to the table, but did not set it down. "There's a bungalow for sale 3 streets from me," she said. "I don't want to rent a room. Whole house. I'm 74. The house doesn't know that." Ruth laughed once. "What's wrong with it?" "Better question is what isn't. Bank took it last year. Back room got rain. Somebody stole pipes. Yard's trying to reclaim the state of Ohio. We're not in Ohio. Then the yard's lost too." Marisol tore a clean strip from her order pad and wrote an address. My cousin looked at it. Said, "It needs everything but a priest. I'm only telling you because you have the face of somebody about to spend $5,000 a month playing cards against her will." Ruth folded the paper and placed it beside her plate. "I am not buying a ruined house. Then you've saved yourself a trip." Ruth paid in cash and left a proper tip, because Frank had believed the moral character of a person could be measured by restaurant tips and the return of borrowed tools. Outside, the morning was warm and windless. The motel stood to her right, its green awning visible beyond the highway. Ruth could return to room 117, open the blue folder, and choose which cheerful brochure would swallow the smallest amount of money each month. She turned left. 3 streets later, the sidewalks narrowed and old maple roots lifted the concrete. The houses were small, mostly bungalows with deep porches and driveways barely wide enough for 1 car. Some were freshly painted. Others leaned into neglect with a kind of weary dignity. Number 38 stood behind waist-high grass. The porch sagged at one corner, a gutter hung loose like a bent arm. Plywood covered one back window, and someone had spray-painted an obscene suggestion on the garage door. Ruth stopped at the rusted gate. Beyond the damage, the house had pale yellow siding, a broad front window, and a porch deep enough for 2 chairs. Morning light touched the glass. For one foolish second, Ruth could see Frank there, holding his coffee in both hands. Then the image was gone. Her phone rang. Claire. Ruth silenced it. A red and white foreclosure notice showed through the front window. Ruth gripped the gate, expecting it to wobble, but it held firm beneath her hand. "Well," she whispered to the house, "you look terrible." The bungalow, having already been left by everyone else, offered no argument. A screen door slapped somewhere behind her. "You planning to buy it or arrest it?" Ruth turned. A man stood on the porch next door holding a broom. He was tall but stooped slightly through the shoulders, wearing green work pants and a white undershirt beneath an open plaid shirt. His dark face was narrow, his close-cropped hair almost entirely gray. "I'm looking," Ruth said. "That's how it gets you. Do you know the house? I know what it sounds like when that gutter comes loose in January." He came down 2 porch steps, but no farther. The broom remained in his hand, as if he had been interrupted during something important. "Bank owns it," he said. "Sign disappeared last week. Figured they'd given up. There's a notice in the window. There have been notices in that window long enough to have birthdays." Ruth looked back at the porch. One column had been wrapped in black plastic near the bottom. The front steps tilted toward the yard, and the grass hid whatever path once led to them. Was it always this bad? No house starts that way. His answer sounded less like wisdom than annoyance. "Did you know the people who lived here? Knew the woman enough to wave. She got sick, went to stay with her sister. After that, trucks came, then the bank, then nobody." He pointed the broom handle toward the driveway. "Copper's gone from under the house. Furnace too, I think. I heard about the pipes. Then you've heard enough." Ruth slipped Marisol's paper into her handbag. "You're very encouraging. I'm not the one standing in weeds staring at a condemned porch like it sent flowers. It isn't condemned. Give it time." He returned to sweeping. Ruth disliked him in a way that felt almost restful. He did not know her age, her children, or the arithmetic of her remaining years. To him, she was simply another fool near a bad house. The foreclosure notice listed a property management company and a number. Ruth took a photograph through the glass, catching her own reflection over the printed words. She looked translucent. Claire called again while Ruth was walking back toward the motel. This time, Ruth answered. "Where have you been?" Claire asked. "Outside." "I called twice." "I saw." "Mom, when you're staying alone in a place like that, you need to pick up." "A place like what?" Claire exhaled. Ruth could picture her pressing 2 fingers to the spot between her eyebrows. "Did you look at Willow Haven?" "I looked at the brochure." "And?" "The people seemed delighted by puzzles." "You always liked puzzles." "I liked doing the Sunday crossword with your father." "That doesn't mean I want to spend the end of my life finding cardboard pieces of a lighthouse." "Nobody said the end of your life. You calculated how many years I could afford." Silence came cleanly through the phone. "You opened the worksheet," Claire said. "It was in my folder. I made it for you. You made it about me. There's a difference." A truck passed, blowing grit against Ruth's ankles. She stopped beside a mailbox shaped like a small red barn. Claire's voice softened. "I am trying to make sure you don't run out of money, and Daniel is trying to make sure I don't keep too much of it. Between the two of you, I'm thoroughly supervised. That's unfair. It's accurate. You agreed to find a senior apartment. I agreed to find somewhere to live. What exactly are you suggesting?" Ruth glanced back, though number 38 was no longer visible. "Nothing yet. Then please don't turn this into a fight because you're angry about the motel. The motel is not a weather event, Claire. I didn't end up there because a river rose. I had to leave. My start date changed, and your brother had to be unavailable. A remarkable alignment of planets. I offered to cancel the job." "No, you didn't. I said I could ask them for more time. You said it while the movers were carrying out your sofa." Another silence. This one hurt them both. Claire finally said, "Will you at least schedule a tour?" "I'll think about it." "That generally means no. It means I'll think about it without you listening." Ruth ended the call before she could soften the words. She had spent so many years sanding the edges off every honest sentence that speaking plainly felt like breaking dishes. Back in room 117, she searched the property management company on her phone. The screen was too small, the print too faint, and the motel's internet connection stopped whenever someone walked past the ice machine. After 15 minutes, she found the listing. Bank-owned property. Sold as is. Cash or renovation, financing only. The photographs had been taken on a gray day. The front room showed buckled carpet and a dark stain spreading from one corner of the ceiling. A cabinet door hung open in the kitchen. In the back bedroom, part of the wall had been removed, exposing wooden studs blackened near the floor. The bathroom sink was missing. The price was $49,000. Ruth enlarged the photographs one by one. Frank had spent his life looking at ruined things and separating ugliness from structural failure. When a client panicked over a crack, he asked whether the crack was moving. When Ruth complained about water stains, he climbed into the attic before discussing paint. She could hear him now. "Don't fall in love with a roof until you've seen what's holding it up." The thought tightened her throat so abruptly that she put down the phone. For nearly a year after his diagnosis, Frank had made lists. Change furnace filter. Shut off outside taps in November. Never let Daniel borrow the table saw because he rushes. Frank trusted instructions when his body had stopped obeying him. He had not made a list for this. Ruth called the number in the listing. The woman who answered spoke quickly and seemed unsurprised that Ruth wanted to see the house. "I can meet you tomorrow at 10, she said. "Just so you understand, it needs significant rehabilitation." "How significant?" "The bank doesn't provide estimates. I didn't ask what the bank provides." A pause. "There was water intrusion in the rear addition. Plumbing and mechanical systems may be incomplete. Utilities are off. You'll want an inspector. Can I bring one to the viewing?" "You can bring whoever you like, Mrs. Mercer, but an initial walkthrough may save you the inspection fee." That was sensible, which irritated Ruth. "I'll be there at 10. She spent the afternoon trying not to think about the appointment. She washed 3 blouses in the bathroom sink and hung them from the shower rod. She went through the important papers bin and discovered that Claire had put Ruth's birth certificate in a plastic sleeve, but left Frank's death certificate loose among expired appliance warranties. At 5, Leonard knocked. "Your son's here." Daniel stood in the parking lot beside his service van, holding Ruth's gray cardigan. He wore a navy work shirt with Mercer appliance stitched above one pocket and Daniel above the other. His sandy hair was thinning at the temples, though he styled it forward as if the fact had not been confirmed. He hugged her tightly, and Ruth hated how relieved she was. "Sorry," he said into her hair. "It's been nuts. You smell like refrigerator. Refrigerators don't smell. Then you should call someone." He carried 2 bins into the room, as if he could improve the situation by rearranging it. When he saw the brochures on the desk, his expression brightened. "You looked at these? I looked at the prices. Claire says the one with the shuttle is good. Claire is 600 miles away. 712. She texted me the route." Daniel picked up the Willow Haven brochure. "This place has a gym. So does prison. Prison doesn't have a salon." Then I stand corrected. He laughed, but his attention drifted toward the legal pad under the folder. Ruth watched him recognize Claire's calculations. $4,000 a month is steep," he said. "It is. You could probably negotiate." "With whom?" "The smiling puzzle women?" He sat on the edge of the bed. "There are regular apartments." "Yes. You'd need something with an elevator, good neighborhood, maybe a front desk. I can open my own front door." "I know you can, Ma." His voice carried the patient note now too, Claire's influence, or perhaps they had developed it independently. Ruth took the property listing from her handbag and held it out. "I'm looking at this tomorrow." Daniel stared at the photograph. Then he read the price twice. "What is it?" "A house." "No, it's a foreclosure. That's a condition of ownership, not a species." He swiped through the listing photographs on her phone. With each image, his eyebrows rose higher. The pipes are gone, some of them. The wall is open, part of it. There's mold, there may be. "Mom, that ceiling looks like wet toast." She took back the phone. "I'm only viewing it." "Why?" "Because it costs less than 1 year at Willow Haven. It'll cost another $100,000 to make it livable. You don't know that. I go into houses every day to fix washing machines, which are generally inside houses." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Is this because you're angry at Claire?" "No. Yes, it is. She dumped you here, and now you want to prove something." Ruth's face warmed. "She dumped me here?" Daniel sat back, realizing too late what he had admitted. "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" "I mean, the whole thing happened fast, and you decided her mistake did not require your inconvenience." "That's not fair. Lena and I are trying to figure out where we're going." "I can't bring my mother into the middle of that. Apparently you can bring her to a motel." "Claire did that, after you said no." His mouth closed. Ruth had rarely cornered Daniel with facts. Facts made him restless, and she loved him most when he was easy. As a result, he had reached 46. Believing discomfort was evidence that someone else had become unreasonable. He stood and paced the 6 available steps between the bed and the kitchenette. "I'm here now, with a cardigan. What do you want me to do?" The question came out louder than either of them expected. Ruth looked at the man her son had become, capable with machines, generous with strangers, tender when nothing was asked of him, and evasive the instant love became inconvenient. She had defended every piece of that contradiction until no one else could see it clearly, including him. "I wanted you to mean what you said," she replied. Daniel looked down at the carpet. After a while, he offered to pay for another week at the motel. Ruth refused. He offered to come to the viewing, then checked his phone and said he had a morning service call he could possibly move. "Don't move it," Ruth said. "You shouldn't go alone. I won't be alone. The agent will be there." "That's not what I meant." "I know." Before leaving, he slipped an envelope onto the desk. Ruth waited until his van pulled away before opening it. Inside were $300 and a note written on the back of an appliance invoice. "For food. Please don't be stubborn." Ruth placed the money in her handbag. Then she took out her checkbook and wrote Daniel a check for the same amount. "Loan repayment," she wrote on the memo line. Not stubbornness. At 9 the next morning, Ruth returned to the diner, wearing clean slacks, her gray cardigan, and the lipstick Claire considered too red. Marisol brought coffee. "You look dangerous," she said. "I have an appointment." "Dentist or house?" Ruth took the foreclosure listing from her bag. Marisol read the viewing time and whistled. That was fast. "I'm gathering information. Sure, I am not buying it." "Didn't say you were." "I have lived in a motel for 4 nights. I am in no condition to make a major financial decision." Marisol poured more coffee. though Ruth's cup was already full. You're in no condition to let somebody else make one either. At 10, Ruth stood again before number 38. A silver sedan waited at the curb. A woman in a camel-colored jacket stepped out, carrying a ring of keys and 2 disposable masks. The man next door was on his porch with the same broom. He called over, "Told you it gets you." Ruth accepted a mask from the agent. "I'm still looking," she said. He nodded toward the dark front window. "That's what the house thinks, too." The agent introduced herself as Beverly Haynes and warned Ruth not to touch anything without gloves. "I brought my own flashlight," Ruth said. Beverly looked at the small metal flashlight Ruth took from her handbag. "Good. It was my husband's." Beverly's expression shifted toward sympathy, but Ruth had already turned to the house. The front lock resisted before opening with a sound like a cough. Inside, the air was cooler and smelled of wet wood, dust, and the stale mineral odor of an unused basement. Sunlight entered through the broad front window, revealing a front room larger than it appeared in the photographs. The carpet had buckled into shallow waves. An old entertainment center stood against one wall, with one glass door missing. "Anything left inside conveys with the property," Beverly said. "I was hoping the cobwebs were negotiable." Beverly smiled. She had a careful smile, professional, but not false. "The bank won't remove personal property." "What personal property?" Beverly gestured toward the entertainment center. "I wouldn't call that personal. I'd call it a warning." Ruth crossed to the ceiling stain. The plaster had cracked around its edges, but the center felt dry when she held her palm near it. "Please don't touch," Beverly reminded her. "I'm not touching. You're nearly touching." Nearly is doing a lot of work there. The front room opened into a narrow dining room with built-in shelves. One shelf tilted downward, and the drawer beneath it was stuck. Through an archway, Ruth could see the kitchen. The cabinets had been painted white over dark wood, then painted yellow over the white. Whoever had applied the yellow believed brush marks were a form of texture. The missing cabinet door lay across the sink. A square of cleaner wallpaper remained where a refrigerator had once stood. There were no copper pipes beneath the sink. Ruth directed her flashlight into the opening. "Do you have experience renovating?" Beverly asked. "No. You seem comfortable. I spent 49 years with a man who believed every Sunday afternoon should include either a hardware store or a ladder." Beverly glanced at the ceiling. "That does provide an education. It provides a vocabulary." The bathroom was worse than the listing suggested. The sink had been removed, leaving 2 pipes cut near the wall. The toilet remained, though a handwritten sign taped to the seat read, "Do not use." The tub was cast iron, deep and chipped, but solid. Small black and white tiles covered the floor. Ruth nudged one tile with the toe of her shoe. "Loose?" Beverly asked. "Only about 100 of them." "You're taking this well. I haven't seen the back room." The first bedroom faced the street. Its wallpaper was faded blue with tiny white flowers, and its closet door refused to close. Yet the floor beneath the torn carpet looked like oak. The room was large enough for Ruth's bed, dresser, and the sewing chair Frank had pretended not to like sitting in. She did not let herself arrange the furniture. The hallway narrowed near the kitchen and ended at a door painted the same unfortunate yellow as the cabinets. Beverly opened it, but did not enter. "This was added sometime in the 70s, she said. The roof above it appears to have failed around the flashing. The back bedroom smelled alive. Black staining climbed the exposed studs near the floor. A section of ceiling had fallen onto a sheet of plastic, and damp insulation sagged between 2 joists. Plywood covered the window facing the yard. The floor gave slightly when Beverly shifted her weight. "That room would need to stay closed," Ruth said. "At a minimum, possibly removed. I'm not qualified to say." The damage continued into a small utility space where the furnace should have been. Electrical wires protruded from a metal box. A disconnected duct lay on the floor like a collapsed animal. For the first time, the house frightened her. Not because it was ugly. Ugly could be cleaned, sanded, painted, or lived with. This damage had depth. Every visible failure pointed toward another behind it. Ruth pictured money flowing into the walls faster than she could count it. Beverly watched her. "This is why I recommend a contractor before you make an offer. I thought agents preferred offers. I prefer offers that close." Ruth stepped back into the kitchen and pulled off her mask. The air there was marginally better. "What about the foundation?" "Crawl space. The bank's report notes no observed structural movement, but that isn't a warranty. Roof age, unknown." Taxes, Beverly answered. Ruth asked about utility liens, insurance difficulties, comparable sales, and whether the bank had received other offers. Beverly answered what she could and clearly marked what she could not. Outside, the yard looked luxurious after the back bedroom. Tall grass brushed Ruth's knees. The garage leaned slightly but remained locked. Behind it, a mature maple shaded a cracked concrete patio. Ivy had consumed most of the fence. The man next door had moved from sweeping to pruning a rose bush. He seemed to possess an unusual number of chores near the property line. "What do you know about the roof?" Ruth called. He straightened. "It leaks. I gathered that." "Then you know what I know." Beverly lowered her voice. "Do you know him?" "He discouraged me yesterday." "That's Earl Boone. He's been here 31 years. Earl cut a dead rose with unnecessary force. 32. You heard that?" Beverly asked. "Heard you tell the roof story, too." Ruth walked closer to the low wire fence separating the yards. "Did you ever see water in the crawl space?" "After a hard rain, some near the back addition." "Standing water?" "Enough for mosquitoes to consider a lease." "Does the front section drain?" "Usually. Any trouble with the maple roots?" "Not unless you're emotionally attached to straight concrete." Ruth nodded. "Thank you." Earl narrowed his eyes. "You shouldn't buy it." I said thank you, not that I'd obey. A corner of his mouth moved. Beverly opened the garage. Inside were 2 rusted lawn chairs, empty paint cans, and a wooden workbench sagging beneath the weight of nothing. The roof showed daylight in 3 places. Ruth turned in a slow circle. The place needed plumbing, heat, roof repairs, mold removal, flooring, electrical work, and patience from a person who had spent most of hers on other people. "What would the house be worth finished?" she asked. Beverly named a range. The lower number was respectable, but hardly transformative. If Ruth bought at the asking price and repairs rose beyond what she could afford, she would own an uninhabitable structure she could not easily sell. It was a bad gamble. She looked toward the porch. From the yard, she could see the broad front window and the east side of the house, where morning sun would fall across the smaller bedroom. "When can an inspector get in?" "As soon as we schedule one. I want someone who doesn't work for the bank." "You should. And not your brother-in-law." "I don't have one." "Good start." Beverly gave her the name of 2 inspection companies, but encouraged her to choose her own. Ruth copied the lockbox details onto the back of Marisol's paper, though Beverly had already promised to handle access. At the motel, Ruth called both companies. One offered a discount if she paid cash, but could not come for 12 days. The other could inspect the following afternoon and charge $475 because the house required a crawlspace examination. Ruth stared at the amount. $475 to be told the place was terrible when a man with a broom had done it for free. She scheduled it. Claire called while Ruth was entering the appointment on her calendar. "I spoke to Willow Haven," Claire said. "They have a studio opening. How fortunate. They can hold it for 48 hours. "No, you haven't seen it. I've seen the cost." "Mom, you can afford it. For a while. That's why we need to discuss a plan." "We discussed one. You put it in a blue folder and left it with me." Claire's voice tightened. "I cannot apologize in every conversation." "You haven't apologized in any of them." "I said I was sorry the timing was bad. The timing didn't put me here. You did. I found you a clean, safe place when my entire life was moving across the country. You found me a room because it was easier than asking your brother to keep his word. I did ask him. And when he said no, what was I supposed to do? Chain you to his radiator?" Ruth almost laughed, which made her angrier. Claire continued, "You know Daniel. If you wanted a real answer from him, you should have asked him yourself." There it was, Daniel's unreliability transformed into a natural condition, like poor soil. Claire planned around it, Ruth absorbed it, and Daniel remained charming. "I should not have needed to negotiate between my children for a bed. You had a bed. In a motel. For 10 days. You make it sound like we put you under a bridge." Ruth looked at the bedspread she still would not sleep beneath. "I have an inspection tomorrow," she said. "A what?" "For a house." Claire was silent long enough that Ruth heard a door close on her end. "What house?" "A bungalow." "You're buying property?" "I'm inspecting it." "Where?" "Near the motel." "What kind of bungalow costs less than Willow Haven?" "One with poor self-esteem." "Mom, please." Ruth gave her the listing address. She could hear Claire typing. The reaction arrived in stages. "Oh no, An eloquent assessment. The ceiling is falling in. In one room, there's black mold, possibly. The description says no functioning mechanical systems. That means no furnace. I know what it means. Claire's voice rose. This isn't a house. It's a demolition project. Frank would have said it has good bones. Dad is not here to fix it. The sentence struck with such accuracy that Ruth could not answer. Claire seemed to hear what she had done. Mom? No, he isn't. I didn't mean, yes, you did. It's the first sensible thing you've said. Ruth ended the call. For several minutes, she sat perfectly still. Then she opened Frank's old coffee mug bin and lifted the chipped brown cup from between two bath towels. Claire had wrapped it more carefully than the death certificate. Ruth held it with both hands, the way Frank had during his last winter when his fingers were always cold. He was not there to climb into the crawl space, argue with roofers, or tell her which cracks were moving. Buying the bungalow would not bring him into the east-facing room. It would only make his absence more expensive. A knock came at the door. Leonard stood outside with an envelope. Your daughter called the desk, he said. Ruth closed her eyes. She wanted me to confirm you were in your room. I'm going to bury her beneath a lighthouse puzzle. Leonard considered this. Those pieces are small, could take years. I have an estimate. She said she was concerned. She's 712 miles away. It's one of her most comfortable emotions. Leonard handed over the envelope. The Crestview logo appeared above an itemized bill. Claire's payment ended Thursday at 11 in the morning. Extending the room would cost $94 a night, plus tax. Ruth thanked him and shut the door. She put Frank's mug on the desk beside the motel bill. Then she placed Claire's legal pad on the other side and began a fresh page. Purchase price, $49,000. Inspection, $475. She added estimated closing costs, property taxes, insurance, and the maximum amount she was willing to spend before the house became an act of pride rather than sense. At the bottom, she wrote one question. What does safe cost if the price is permission? She stared at it, disliked its drama, and crossed it out. Beneath it, she wrote a better one. Can the front half be made livable before winter? The next afternoon, the inspector arrived in a white truck carrying 2 ladders and a moisture meter. Earl was already on his porch. Ruth pointed at him. Not a word. He raised both hands. I was only going to ask, he said, whether you brought $475 to hear that it leaks. The inspector looked from Ruth to Earl, then down at his clipboard. Do I need to know something? No, Ruth said. Yes, Earl said. It leaks. The inspector's name was Warren Price. He had thick gray eyebrows, a red beard going white at the chin, and the calm manner of a man who had delivered bad news in every kind of kitchen. All houses leak eventually, Warren said. Question is where, how much, and what it ruined. Earl seemed satisfied by this and went back inside. Warren began at the exterior, photographing the foundation, gutters, siding, and the wrapped porch column. Ruth followed until he stopped and asked whether she planned to climb onto the roof with him. I could hold the ladder. I have stabilizers. I could hold the stabilizers. You could stand somewhere. I won't land on you. Ruth moved to the driveway. Beverly arrived while Warren was above the back addition. She carried a paper cup and wore flat shoes this time. He's thorough, she said. For $475, I hope he learns the house's private thoughts. They watched Warren press gently at the shingles with one boot. The main roof is older, but not failing, he called down. Addition roof is another story. How much older? Ruth asked. Old enough to lie about its age. Beverly sipped her coffee. You found someone who speaks your language. Inside, Warren opened the electrical panel and frowned at the mismatched breakers. He tested outlets with a small device, examined the cut plumbing, and directed his flashlight into every opening. In the bathroom, he crouched beside the tub. Cast iron, he said. Worth keeping if the drain line's intact. Frank would have liked you. Was he an inspector? Contractor. Warren glanced up. Then you know enough to be dangerous. Everyone keeps saying that, as if it's discouraging. In the back bedroom, Warren put on a respirator and asked Ruth and Beverly to remain in the kitchen. He tested the walls and floor with a moisture meter, then disappeared through a hatch into the crawl space. Ruth listened to him moving beneath the floor. The sound was intimate and unsettling, like the house had swallowed him. After several minutes, his voice came through the opening. Foundation block is straight. Some mortar needs attention. standing moisture toward the rear. Rot, Ruth called. Some under the addition. Main structure looks better. How much better? I'll tell you when I'm not speaking through dirt. He emerged with cobwebs in his beard and mud on one knee. At his truck, he removed the respirator and drank half a bottle of water before saying anything. The house isn't beyond repair. Relief came so quickly that Ruth distrusted it. Warren held up one finger. That does not mean you should buy it. Understood. The main portion is reasonably sound for its age. Foundation is stable. Roof over the original structure may give you 3 to 5 years if the flashing and damaged area are repaired. The back addition needs professional mold remediation, framing repairs, and probably a new roof. I'd isolate it until that work is complete. Can it be isolated? Yes. Door closes. HVAC isn't connected because there is no HVAC. Beverly smiled into her coffee. The electrical service needs corrections, Warren continued. Some wiring has been removed. Plumbing has been cut in multiple locations, but the main supply appears intact. Sewer line needs a camera. Furnace is gone. Water heater is gone. Front porch column has rot at the base. But it's not the only thing holding up the porch. What would make the front half livable? Safe electrical service. Working plumbing and hot water. Heat. Smoke detectors. Secure doors and windows. I'd remove the carpet because it's been wet. Repair the active roof leak. You could close off the back room and garage. Before winter, if you hire competent people now and don't mind living around unfinished work. Money, I don't estimate. You must have a thought. I have many thoughts. None of them are bids. Ruth folded her arms. Warren sighed. I've seen buyers spend $30,000 on houses like this. I've seen them spend $80,000. The difference is what they discover, what they insist on replacing, and whether they hire somebody whose truck still has 3 different company names painted under the current one. He promised the written report by morning and gave her the names of a plumber, electrician, roofer, and general contractor. Then he looked directly at Ruth. If buying this leaves you without a reserve, don't buy it. It won't. If you need it to be pretty in 6 months, don't buy it. I don't. If you're buying because somebody told you not to, find a less expensive argument. Beverly looked away. Ruth said, "That'll be all, Mr. Price." He smiled. "That's what my wife says." At the diner, Marisol pushed a slice of coconut cream pie in front of Ruth without being asked. "I ordered eggs." The pie looked worried. Ruth told her the foundation was sound. Marisol grinned. "So you're buying it?" "I said the foundation is sound. You said it like somebody reporting a clean bill of health." Ruth stabbed the pie with her fork. "It still needs plumbing, electricity, heat, roof work, mold removal, flooring, porch repair, and every wall painted. Paint's easy. You say that because you've never watched Frank choose between 2 shades of beige for 6 weeks. Did he pick the right one? He picked the first one." Marisol laughed. Men enjoy taking the scenic route to surrender. Ruth spent the next 2 days meeting tradespeople. A plumber fed a camera down the sewer line and found one cracked section near the street but no collapse. The electrician declared the panel usable after repairs, though several rooms would need rewiring. The roofer climbed up, came down, and used the phrase "not dead yet," which Ruth found more reassuring than she should have. Their estimates filled 3 pages of her notebook. Essential plumbing, $8,600. Electrical, $5,200. Furnace and water heater, $7,900. Roof repairs and temporary sealing of the addition, $4,400. Mold remediation and removal of damaged material, between $6,000 and $10,000, depending on what appeared behind the walls. Nothing included flooring, paint, appliances, porch work, or the cracked sewer section that could survive another year or fail in November. The general contractor, Glenn Pritchard, arrived 40 minutes late in a clean black pickup. He was in his early 60s, broad through the waist, with silver hair combed neatly back. He apologized for the delay and listened while Ruth described her priorities. "Safe first," she said. "Pretty can wait. That's how I work. Everybody says that. I mean it." Glenn walked the house with Warren's report, taking measurements and making notes. Unlike the others, he did not react to Ruth's age or ask whether a son would be involved. He understood phased work. He suggested closing the doorway to the addition, with plastic containment before demolition, and showed her where a smaller heating unit could reduce costs. "I can coordinate the trades," he said. "Save you some scheduling headaches." "What does that cost?" "Less than hiring the wrong people twice." It sounded like something Frank might have said, which made Ruth wary and inclined to trust him at the same time. Glenn estimated $37,000 for the first phase if the hidden damage stayed within expectations. He could begin in 2 weeks and make the front bedroom and bathroom usable within another 3. 5 weeks, Ruth said. "Give or take." "What does give or take mean in days?" He smiled. "You really were married to a contractor." "For 49 years. I know that give or take means the customer gives and the contractor takes." Glenn laughed loudly enough to fill the empty kitchen. "Put that in the contract." His estimate was the lowest, but not absurdly so. His license was current. 2 references answered and praised his work, though one mentioned delays. Ruth wrote that in the margin. By Thursday morning, the Crestview bill had reached the amount Claire had paid. Ruth extended the room for 1 week with her own card. Leonard watched her sign. Found somewhere? Possibly. Good possibly, or bad possibly. Structurally stable possibly. He nodded as if that clarified everything. Upstairs in the small business alcove near the vending machines, Ruth printed Warren's report, Glenn's proposal, the other estimates, and the bank listing. She spread them across a table beneath a framed photograph of a waterfall. She had netted $162,000 from the sale of the family house after paying the remaining mortgage and closing costs. Claire's preferred residence would consume nearly $60,000 in the first year before increases or extra services. The bungalow, even with an ugly repair overrun, could be purchased and made habitable while leaving Ruth with a reserve. That did not make it safe. It made the risk visible. Her phone rang. "Daniel, Claire says you're putting an offer on that dump." "Claire says many things. Are you?" "I'm reviewing numbers. I can come tonight." "To do what?" "Talk sense into you." "I have sense. What I lack is housing. I told you I'd help. You gave me $300. You sent it back. I put it toward what you owe me." Daniel breathed heavily into the phone. "Why are you being like this?" Ruth examined the photograph of the yellow bungalow. "Like what? Cold?" "No, Daniel. Cold is when you have no furnace. This is clarity. Dad would never let you do this." The words were harsher than Claire's had been because Daniel said them with confidence. "Your father," Ruth said, "would have inspected the crawl space himself, complained about the price of copper, and then helped me decide. He did not let me live. I simply allowed him to do more of the worrying. You don't know what he'd say. Neither do you." She ended the call, but her hand shook afterward. At 2 that afternoon, Ruth met Beverly in the motel lobby. "I want to offer $42,000, Ruth said. Beverly's eyebrows rose. "The asking price is $49. The back addition is compromised, the mechanical systems are missing, and the sewer line is cracked. The bank knows the condition. Then they won't be offended. Banks don't get offended." Another advantage. Beverly prepared the offer at the lobby's little breakfast table. Ruth proved funds, initialed the as-is clauses, and insisted on a brief inspection contingency even though the bank had already provided access. Her signature looked smaller than it had on the sale papers for the family home. The bank countered the next day at $47,500. Ruth responded at $45,000. They accepted. Beverly called just after sunset. Ruth was sitting outside room 117 with Frank's mug full of motel coffee and Marisol's address folded in her pocket. "Congratulations," Beverly said. "You're under contract." Across the parking lot, headlights came on one by one. Ruth thanked her, ended the call, and remained in the chair. She had expected triumph. Instead, she felt the precise weight of every room she had just agreed to rescue. Then Claire sent a message. "Please tell me you didn't." Ruth looked at the words until the screen dimmed. She picked up Frank's mug and drank the terrible coffee. "I did," she said aloud. The message remained unanswered until morning. Ruth did not sleep well. She lay on top of the motel bedspread with the thin blanket tucked beneath her chin, listening to the ice machine drop cubes at irregular intervals. Each crash sounded like a pipe breaking inside a wall she now partly owned. At 7, Claire called. "You didn't answer me. I was sleeping." "No, you weren't." Ruth turned on the bedside lamp. "Then why mention it?" "Because this is serious." "Can you withdraw the offer?" "I don't want to." "You haven't closed yet. You can still stop." At the cost of my deposit. That's better than losing everything. I am not losing everything. You are buying a house with no furnace. I know. No bathroom. It has a bathroom. A room containing a broken toilet is not a bathroom. The toilet isn't broken, it's disconnected. Claire made a small, strangled sound. Ruth pictured her walking through her new kitchen, still filled with boxes, searching for a surface on which to place her anger. Did you call Daniel? Ruth asked. He called me. Of course he did. We are not conspiring against you. No. Conspiracies require planning. You think this is funny? I think parts of it are. Mom, what happens when the repairs go over budget? What happens when you fall? What happens when some contractor cheats you? I deal with it. You call me. Ruth sat up. That's what frightens you, isn't it? What? That I'll make a choice you don't approve of, and you'll still feel responsible if it goes badly. I am your daughter. I am responsible. No, you're concerned. Those are different. Claire went quiet. Ruth had meant the distinction kindly, but Claire heard it as dismissal. You certainly liked my responsibility when you were living in my house. I liked being with you. You criticized everything. I reorganized your pantry. You reorganized my entire kitchen. You couldn't find the cinnamon. I didn't need the cinnamon. You were making apple crisp. I could have bought cinnamon. Ruth pressed 2 fingers to her lips. Their worst arguments often wandered into ridiculous places and then refused to leave. I shouldn't have changed your kitchen, she said. Claire seemed caught without the next line. And you shouldn't have left me here, Ruth continued. I know. It was barely audible. Ruth waited. I know, Claire said again. I just don't know what you want me to do about it now. Stop treating the house as evidence that I've lost my mind. What if it is? Then visit and find out. Claire promised nothing, neither did Ruth. Before leaving for breakfast, Ruth opened her banking app to transfer the earnest money. Under account settings, she noticed Claire's name, listed as a trusted contact. Ruth remembered signing a stack of forms after Frank's death, while Claire pointed to each yellow tab. A trusted contact could not remove money, but the bank could call Claire if it suspected confusion or exploitation. Claire had not stolen anything. She had simply placed herself at the edge of Ruth's decisions, ready to be consulted about whether Ruth remained competent to make them. Ruth removed her name. At the diner, Marisol brought Ruth a plate with 1 egg instead of 2, and an extra slice of toast. You're losing weight, she said. I bought the house. That'll do it. $45,000. Marisol slid into the opposite side of the booth. You own it? Under contract. Then you don't own it yet. Apparently you and Beverly went to the same school of joy. When do you close? 12 days, if the title work is clean. And where are you staying after Thursday? Ruth looked toward the motel. Marisol followed her gaze. Absolutely not. I can afford another week. You can afford to set money on fire, too. Doesn't make it heat. The house has no functioning bathroom. I have a spare room. Ruth put down her fork. No. Why? I have recently completed a free trial of living with another woman who corrects the way I load a dishwasher. I don't care how you load it. You will. I care how you season chicken. That's different. Ruth smiled but shook her head. Thank you. Truly. Marisol did not push. Offer stands until you insult my chicken. The 12 days filled themselves with signatures, phone calls, and expenses. The insurance company required photographs, a renovation schedule, and payment for a full year in advance. The storage facility holding Ruth's furniture notified her that Claire's card had been removed from the account, and the next monthly fee would be due in 5 days. Claire had not mentioned doing it. Ruth entered her own card information and said nothing. The silence felt childish, then satisfying, then lonely. Glenn required a deposit to reserve the work and order materials. His contract called for $12,000 at signing, another payment after rough plumbing and electrical, and the balance at completion of the first phase. 12 is a lot before work starts, Ruth said. It covers the furnace order, water heater, dumpster, containment materials, and scheduling. I want receipts. You'll have them. And I want the start date written in. Glenn wrote Monday, October 3rd in blue ink and initialed it. Your husband really was a contractor, he said. My husband also once accepted half a ham as final payment from a man who owed him $800. Was it good ham? It was excellent. That was not the point. Glenn promised the house would be ready for limited occupancy within 3 weeks of the start date. Ruth wrote limited occupancy beside his signature and made him define it. Functioning bathroom, hot water, heat, safe electrical service, and one habitable bedroom. He did not object. On closing day, Beverly met Ruth at a title office in a strip mall between a tax preparer and a store selling medical uniforms. There was no ceremonial handing over of a giant key. Ruth signed her name 31 times beneath fluorescent lights, while a young closing officer explained documents too quickly. When the wire transfer was confirmed, the officer pushed a small envelope across the table. "Congratulations, Mrs. Mercer." Inside were 2 keys, one newer than the other. "That's it?" Ruth asked. Beverly smiled. "That's it." Ruth expected the room to tilt. It did not. The closing officer gathered the papers and asked Beverly where she wanted to go for lunch. Outside, Beverly took Ruth's photograph holding the keys. "Would you like me to send this to your children?" "No." "Fair enough." Ruth asked for the picture anyway. At number 38, the front lock opened more easily than before. The rooms were unchanged. The carpet still smelled damp. The bathroom still lacked a sink. Owning the damage made it appear larger. Ruth walked to the east-facing bedroom and opened the curtains. Dust rose in the sunlight. Someone had painted tiny daisies along the top of the baseboard, nearly hidden by the carpet. She set Frank's coffee mug on the windowsill. A knock sounded against the open front door. Earl stood on the porch holding a red fire extinguisher. "Housewarming gift," he said. Ruth stared at it. "It's either funny or practical," he added. "Haven't decided." She accepted it. "Thank you. You closed today?" "An hour ago." "Sorry to hear it. I can return this." He stepped inside and looked around as if he had not crossed the threshold in years. "Smells better." "No, it doesn't." "Then maybe you do." Earl carried the extinguisher into the kitchen and showed her where to mount it after the walls were cleaned. He also pointed out the main water shutoff in the crawlspace access, the exterior outlet that sparked in wet weather, and the storm window on the front bedroom that would fall inward if opened too far. "You've been inside before," Ruth said. "Helped the previous owner with things." "The woman who got sick?" "Miss Pauline. Proud as a fence post. Wouldn't ask for help until the problem had developed grandchildren." Ruth glanced toward the back room. Did she lose the house because she was sick? Earl's face closed slightly. "Don't know her business. She left. Bank came. That's all I know." He headed for the door. "Earl," he turned. "Do you have a vacuum I can borrow? I have one you can keep. It frightens my cat." Ruth had not seen a cat. "Maybe your cat has good judgment. Maybe you should get your own vacuum." He brought it over 10 minutes later. Glenn was supposed to begin Monday. At 8:30 that morning, Ruth stood in the yard waiting for his black pickup. At 9:15, she called. He apologized and said a supplier had sent the wrong containment sheeting. His crew would arrive after lunch. At 2, no one had come. At 4:20, Glenn called to say one of his men had gone home sick. He would bring a crew Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning became Tuesday afternoon. On Wednesday, 2 workers arrived, carried the ruined carpet from the front bedroom, rolled plastic across the back room doorway, and left before noon because the dumpster had not been delivered. Beneath the carpet, the oak floor was stained but solid. Ruth stood among the exposed tack strips and tried to feel grateful. Glenn answered her first call, and not her second. In the evening, he texted that the dumpster company had scheduling issues, but everything remained on track. Ruth wrote the missed days in her notebook. The motel bill continued rising. On Friday, the electrician Glenn had named arrived alone. He seemed surprised to learn that demolition had barely begun. "I thought they'd have the walls open," he said. "So did I." He made the service safe, disconnected the sparking exterior outlet, and restored power to the front rooms. The plumber came later and reconnected the toilet and a single cold water tap in the kitchen. He could not install the water heater because Glenn had not ordered it. "He told me the deposit covered the order," Ruth said. The plumber shrugged. "I just know it isn't here." Ruth called Glenn. Voicemail. That afternoon, she checked out of the Crestview. Leonard helped load the 6 bins into Marisol's aging station wagon. When Ruth gave him her room key, he looked at the address on her receipt. That the structurally stable, possibly. The very one. Does it have heat? Not yet. A bed? It will. A door that locks? Yes. He considered the answer, then handed back the key card. "Keep this until midnight, in case reality develops." Marisol drove Ruth to number 38, with the suitcase wedged between them and the fern lying across the back seat like an exhausted passenger. Inside the bungalow, an extension cord powered one lamp. The toilet flushed. The kitchen tap ran cold. A borrowed hot plate sat on the counter beside a box of tea. Ruth's mattress had been delivered from storage and placed directly on the east bedroom floor. The daisies along the baseboard showed above it. Marisol set down the last bin. "You can still come home with me." Ruth looked at the plastic ceiling off the dark hallway, the bare floor, and Frank's chipped mug on the windowsill. "No," she said. "I think I already did." The first sound Ruth heard after Marisol left was the refrigerator that did not exist. It hummed in her memory while she unpacked tea, crackers, a saucepan, and 2 cans of soup. Then the imagined hum stopped, and the silence of the bungalow settled around her. Outside, Earl dragged his trash container to the curb. A car passed slowly. Pipes clicked beneath the kitchen when Ruth turned off the tap, though there was no hot water and almost nothing connected that should click. She checked the front lock twice. The hot plate boiled water faster than expected and scorched a brown circle into the folding table Marisol had lent her. Ruth ate tomato soup from one of the casserole dishes Claire had packed. She used a bath towel as a curtain in the bedroom and slept in her cardigan. At 2:17, something scratched inside the wall. Ruth sat up and switched on Frank's flashlight. The scratching stopped. "You live here?" she whispered. "I paid closing costs." Whatever it was remained unconvinced. Morning light entered through the east window before 6. It spread across the oak floor in a clean rectangle, brightening the painted daisies near the baseboard. For several minutes, Ruth lay still and watched it reach the mattress. The room was cold. Her back hurt. She needed a shower. Marisol opened her front door at 7, wearing a robe the color of mustard. "You lasted 9 hours," she said. "I require plumbing, not rescue. Bathrooms upstairs. Blue towels are clean. Brown towels are decorative." "What is a decorative towel?" "A towel my sister gave me that absorbs nothing." Ruth showered while Marisol made coffee. The water was hot enough to loosen the muscles in Ruth's shoulders and reveal how tense they had been. She stayed longer than she meant to, then felt guilty about the steam on Marisol's mirror and wiped it with the useless brown towel. When she came downstairs, Earl was seated at the kitchen table eating toast. Ruth stopped. "Do you simply enter women's houses in the morning?" "He brought my newspaper," Marisol said. "The boy threw it under my car," Earl explained. "The boy is 40 and has opinions about jazz," Marisol said. "Sit down." Ruth had never been in Marisol's house beyond the front room. The kitchen was small and crowded, with copper pans hanging above a table scarred by years of use. Notes, receipts, and photographs covered the refrigerator door. A stack of unopened envelopes leaned against the sugar bowl. Earl looked at Ruth's damp hair. No hot water? Temporarily. No heat? Also temporary. No dignity. That vanished at the motel. Marisol placed eggs in front of her. "Glenn coming today?" "He says so." "What time?" "He has learned not to specify." Earl grunted. "You know him?" Ruth asked. "Know of him. That is never followed by anything pleasant. He did a kitchen on Birch. Good work. Took 4 months. It was supposed to take 6 weeks, Marisol said. Ruth put down her fork. "You knew that?" "I knew after you hired him. I mentioned his name before I signed the contract. You mentioned 17 names while explaining a sewer camera. You might have interrupted." Marisol folded her arms. "You were on your 4th day of telling everybody you didn't need help." "I did not say that. You said, 'I have the matter in hand,' which is old white lady for die before assisting me." Earl covered a laugh with his coffee cup. Ruth ate her eggs in furious bites. "I am leaving." "You just got here," Marisol said. "I have a contractor to fire. Not before you get your furnace." Ruth hated that Marisol was right. At number 38, Glenn's truck arrived at 10:30, followed by a delivery van carrying the furnace and water heater. Relief weakened Ruth's anger just enough to be useful. Glenn came inside with a clipboard and an explanation already prepared. "The supplier delay put us behind, but we're moving now. Furnace crew Monday, plumbing rough-in Tuesday. You promised limited occupancy by next Friday. We'll be close. Close is not hot water. Mrs. Mercer, renovation schedules shift, then contracts should be printed on rubber." His smile appeared and disappeared. "I understand you're frustrated. Don't describe me. Tell me what will be done today." He listed tasks: remove remaining flooring, open the bathroom wall, finish containment, prepare for the furnace. By noon, 3 workers were inside. The noise was so reassuring that Ruth walked to the diner rather than supervise. When she returned at 3, only 1 worker remained. He was pulling tack strips from the dining room floor with a pry bar. "Where is everyone?" Ruth asked. "Glenn moved them to another job." "Are you coming back tomorrow?" The worker concentrated on a nail. "You'd have to ask Glenn." "What's your name?" "Ray." "Ray, is my job going to be finished?" Ray looked toward the front window, perhaps judging whether escape through it was possible. "We finish jobs. That wasn't the question." He did not answer. After he left, Ruth found 2 lengths of tack strip still nailed along the bedroom wall. She tried Glenn again. Voicemail. The pry bar lay beside a pile of debris. Ruth picked it up. Frank had shown her how to place a block of wood beneath the curve so the tool would not gouge the floor. She found a scrap, knelt, and worked the first nail loose. The sharp pop gave her a small, vindictive pleasure. The second strip came up easily. The third caught beneath the baseboard. Ruth shifted her grip and pulled harder. The strip released suddenly. Her right hand bent backward and pain shot from her thumb into her wrist. She sat on the floor, holding her arm against her chest. "Damn it, Frank!" The words echoed. Frank had been gone 14 months, and still she blamed him first when tools misbehaved. The wrist swelled before dinner. Ruth wrapped it in a dish towel around a bag of frozen peas Earl brought from his freezer. He stood in the doorway, looking at the pry bar. "Contractor, do that?" "My own foolishness." "Good. I didn't want to fight him." "You were planning to fight me? You appear injured enough." He came inside and examined the tack strip. "You know these nails don't care how independent you are." I had nearly finished. That's how nails win. Ruth expected him to take over. Instead, he placed the pry bar out of reach and asked whether she wanted him to finish. The question, more than the offer, eased something in her. "Yes," she said. "Please." Earl removed the final strip in less than a minute, then swept the nails into a coffee can. He did not comment on her technique. Daniel arrived after dark carrying a compact space heater, 2 grocery bags, and the expression of a man entering a hostage situation. "Claire said you moved in." "How did Claire know?" "She called the motel." "Of course." He stepped into the bedroom and saw the mattress on the floor. "Ma, don't. This is insane. Put the heater near the wall, away from the towel curtain." He set down the bags and noticed her wrapped wrist. "What happened?" "I strained it." "Doing what?" "Work." "What work?" "The sort that strains wrists." Daniel knelt in front of her. His anger shifted instantly into concern. He touched the swelling with careful fingers, turning her hand until she winced. "You need an X-ray. I need ice. You don't know if it's broken. I can move it. That doesn't mean anything. It means several things." He drove her to an urgent care clinic despite her objections. The X-ray showed no fracture. The physician fitted Ruth with a brace, told her to rest the wrist, and gave her a look that suggested women her age should not be pulling construction materials from floors. Daniel was quieter on the drive back. At the bungalow, he plugged in the heater and put groceries into a cooler. He had bought bread, cheese, fruit, canned chili, instant oatmeal, and a package of chocolate cookies Frank used to hide behind the flour. Ruth held up the cookies. "These are medicinal?" "For inflammation." He sat on the folding chair while she lowered herself onto the mattress. "Come stay at my apartment," he said. "For how long?" "Until the heat is on. And where will you work? I'll figure it out." "What about Lena? She'll understand." Ruth believed he meant the offer. She also knew he had waited until she had already solved the problem badly enough to make rescuing her feel heroic. "I'm staying," she said. "Why?" "Because I live here. You can live here later." "No. Later is what everyone keeps offering me." Daniel looked around the unfinished room. "This place is beyond repair." Ruth's eyes moved to the exposed oak floor, the daisies, and Frank's mug on the sill. "No," she said. "It's inconvenient. You confuse the two whenever inconvenience belongs to you." He flinched. Ruth regretted the sentence, but not enough to withdraw it. Daniel stood. "You don't have to punish us forever. I've owned the house for 4 days. You know what I mean." "No, Daniel. I don't think any of us knows what we mean anymore." He left the heater, groceries, and cookies. Ruth watched his van through the front window until it turned the corner. Glenn's crew did not appear Monday. The furnace installer called Ruth directly to say Glenn had postponed because the equipment payment had not cleared. Ruth checked her bank records. Her $12,000 deposit had cleared more than 3 weeks earlier. She called Glenn 6 times. At 4, he answered. "Accounting mix-up," he said. "I'm handling it." You told me the furnace was paid for. It's ordered and delivered. Delivered is not paid. It will be handled tomorrow. I want receipts tonight. I'm on another site. Then photograph them. He sighed. Mrs. Mercer, if you don't trust me, this is going to be difficult. It is already difficult. Trust would merely change whose fault that is. No receipts arrived. The next morning, Ruth showered again at Marisol's, put on her cleanest blouse, and asked to use the dining table. She spread out Glenn's contract, Warren's report, the bank statements, and her notebook of missed workdays. Marisol read in silence. Earl stood behind her with his arms crossed. You can terminate for failure to perform, Marisol said, tapping a paragraph. He'll claim the delays are normal. Are they? Not all of them. How much do you lose? Ruth had calculated it twice. Glenn could charge for completed demolition, materials already delivered, coordination, permit preparation, and a cancellation percentage. If he disputed the amount, recovering the rest could cost more time and money than she wanted to spend. Best case, $3,000, she said. Worst, nearly $6,000. Earl whistled. Marisol looked at Ruth's braced wrist. What's staying cost? Ruth folded the papers. Glenn arrived at number 38 that afternoon. He looked older than he had when he wrote the estimate. I can fix this, he said. You had the opportunity. I moved too fast on the schedule. That's on me. Give me another week. You've already taken 3. I'll personally supervise. No. His embarrassment hardened. You'll owe for work performed and materials. I know. You won't find someone else this late in the season. Then I'll be cold with more accurate paperwork. For an hour, they went through every line. Ruth recovered part of the unused deposit, kept the furnace and water heater, and paid far too much for the little work completed. When Glenn drove away, she stood on the porch with a check in one hand and a loss of $4,300 written in her notebook. Marisol arrived carrying a pot of stew. I know somebody, she said. If his name is Glenn, leave. Her name is Tessa Green. Ruth looked at the dark doorway where the back half of the house waited behind plastic. Does she finish jobs? Marisol handed over the pot. She finishes conversations. Start there. Tessa Green arrived at 7 the next morning in a white van with one blue door and a ladder secured to the roof by 3 different straps. Ruth watched from the porch. Is the door intentional? She asked. Door is newer than the van. Tessa was 53, compact and square-shouldered, with dark hair cut close at the sides and silver threaded through the top. She wore work boots, canvas pants, and small gold hoop earrings. A pencil rested behind one ear. Marisol climbed out of the passenger seat carrying coffee. I thought you were introducing us, Ruth said. I did. Tessa, Ruth, person who currently has heat in her own home. Tessa looked toward the open front door. You living in there? In the front bedroom? No furnace? It's in the dining room. Installed? Decorative? Tessa looked at Marisol. You left her here? You'll find she's difficult to transport against her will. I have a wrist brace, Ruth said. Don't test me. Tessa did not smile. She walked inside and stood still for several seconds, letting her eyes move from the bare floors to the plastic containment. Then she opened Glenn's contract, Warren's report, and the collection of estimates Ruth had arranged on the folding table. Who did the containment? Tessa asked. Glenn's crew. It's wrong. In what way? No sealed air return. Plastic isn't taped at the floor. Demolition dust can move under it. Tessa crouched and lifted one corner with 2 fingers. They use painter's plastic. Can you fix it? Yes. How much? I'm still telling you what's wrong. I already know many things are wrong. I'm interested in the price of fewer. Tessa looked at her for the first time with something close to amusement. She spent 2 hours in the house. She opened every cabinet, tested the repaired outlets, climbed into the crawl space, and telephoned the furnace installer while standing in the yard. She spoke in short, precise sentences and did not pretend the installer's explanations impressed her. When she finished, she wiped her boots on the grass and came inside. The furnace can go in tomorrow if he's paid directly, she said. Same with the water heater. I can redo containment today, get the damaged material out this week, and bring a plumber Friday. You're available immediately. My flooring job moved because the owner's cabinets didn't arrive. That sounds like something Glenn would say. It probably is. Difference is, I'll show you the empty room where cabinets should be. Tessa wrote numbers on a yellow pad. The remaining work would cost more than Glenn had estimated. She separated labor, materials, subcontractors, permits, and a contingency for damage not yet visible. Ruth examined the total. This puts me $9,000 over the first phase budget. Then cut the first phase. What would you cut? Kitchen cabinets stay. Floor gets cleaned, not refinished. Porch waits except for the bad column. Back room gets dried, cleaned, and made structurally safe, but not finished. No painting except where we open walls. That still leaves me $4,000 over. Then don't hire me to coordinate everything. Pay the trades directly. I charge for managing them. You're recommending I pay you less? I'm recommending you don't spend money pretending you have more money. Marisol, who had remained unusually quiet, lifted her coffee in Tessa's direction. Ruth asked for 3 references. I brought 5. License? Tessa handed it over. Insurance? Another document. Any customers who disliked you? Several. Can I call one? No. One refuses to speak to me because I wouldn't install a bathtub on a floor that couldn't hold it. Another wanted me to hide water damage from his wife. What about the others? I can give you the number of a man who thinks I'm rude but hired me twice. Ruth called him first. By noon, Tessa had a signed contract and a check covering 2 days of labor and the containment materials. No large deposit. Materials were to be paid as ordered, with receipts attached. You don't take an advance? Ruth asked. Not until I've worked for somebody. That seems risky. For me, yes. Tessa unloaded rolls of heavy plastic, tape, a zipper doorway, and an air scrubbing machine. Marisol left for her diner shift. Ruth remained in the dining room, watching Tessa seal the haul. You can sit down, Tessa said. I am sitting down. You're perched. It makes people nervous. This is my relaxed posture. Must be exhausting. Tessa worked without radio or conversation for nearly an hour. When she finished, the plastic stretched tight across a temporary frame, sealed at every edge. The machine's hose ran through a panel fitted into the plywood-covered window. It'll be loud, Tessa said. Keep that bedroom door shut at night. Is the dust dangerous? Any demolition dust is bad. With your age and the mold, I'd rather be excessive. My age has become everyone's favorite tool. Your lungs are 74 whether your opinions agree or not. Ruth disliked the sentence. She also respected it. The furnace installer arrived the following morning. He worked in the utility space, while Tessa and a helper named Jerome removed the ruined material from the back room in sealed bags. Ruth stayed on the porch under strict orders. Earl stood at the fence, listening to the hammering. She any good? He asked. She has 5 references and a blue van door. That wasn't the question. I'm withholding judgment, so yes. By afternoon, warm air came through the bedroom vent, carrying the smell of dust and new metal. Ruth stood over it until her feet hurt. Tessa found her there. Heat works, she said. I noticed. You can turn the thermostat down now. It has been cold in this house for 2 years. And it has no bank account. Ruth lowered the thermostat from 76 to 70. That evening, she slept beneath the blanket instead of in her cardigan. The scratching in the wall had stopped after Earl placed traps in the crawl space, though he reported no success and suggested the animal had moved away in disgust. Hot water arrived 2 days later. The plumber installed the water heater, reconnected the bathtub, and fitted a temporary utility sink in the bathroom because the vanity would have to wait. The first time Ruth turned the hot tap, brown water coughed into the basin, followed by a clear, steaming stream. She called Marisol. I have hot water. Do you remember what to do with it? I may need instructions. Brown towels remain decorative. Ruth took a bath in the chipped cast iron tub. There was no shower curtain, so she hung a plastic drop cloth from the rod. The bathroom walls were open in 2 places, and the temporary sink belonged in a laundry room, but the water reached her shoulders. She stayed until it cooled. Progress changed the house's sounds. The furnace breathed. Water moved beneath the floor. Tessa's air scrubber hummed behind plastic, and her tools struck the framing in measured bursts. Each noise meant money, yet silence no longer felt like abandonment. Tessa discovered rot along one side of the addition. Less than Warren feared, but more than the estimate allowed. She called Ruth into the doorway and showed her the softened sill plate. We can replace this section and reinforce the next, Tessa said. Or open the rest of the wall now and learn what continues. What do you recommend? Open it. Cost $600 if it stops there. And if it doesn't, I won't invent a number. Ruth approved the opening. The rot stopped 3 feet later. 600, Tessa said. I was hoping you'd sound happier. I'm happy on the inside. You should notify your face. Tessa laughed, a short surprise sound, then seemed annoyed that Ruth had caused it. During breaks, Tessa ate at the folding table and completed paperwork from a battered accordion file. Ruth tried not to look. The invoices protruded in no order. Receipts had been shoved into envelopes marked with unrelated months. A plumbing bill lay folded around a grocery coupon. On the third day, Ruth could no longer tolerate it. Your bookkeeping is appalling. Tessa kept eating her sandwich. Your wall is open. My wall is supposed to be open. My receipts are supposed to be in that file. They are not filed. They are trapped. I pay someone. Who? My former partner. Does she know? She knows I used to pay her. The separation lived inside that sentence. Tessa closed the accordion file. Nadia handled the office. I handled the work. We split up in June. Business split took longer. I'm sorry, don't be. She isn't. Ruth looked away to give the remark privacy. Tessa had started her own company name, transferred insurance, bought the van, and kept 4 clients. She spoke as if these were simple tasks, but overdue notices showed through the transparent window of the file. Your electrical subcontractor's invoice is past due, Ruth said. Tessa pulled the file closer. Were you reading my mail? It was facing me. So is the house. You don't see it staring? You'll pay a late fee. I'll pay it. You're also billing 30-day terms while paying materials immediately. Tessa stopped chewing. That creates a cash gap, Ruth continued, especially if clients delay. I know what a cash gap is. Then why are you digging one? For a moment, Tessa looked ready to leave. Ruth recognized the expression because she had worn it in Marisol's kitchen when offered accurate information without permission. I apologize, Ruth said. That was intrusive? Yes. I am still right. Yes. Tessa returned to her sandwich. The next morning, she brought the accordion file into the east bedroom and set it beside Ruth's mattress. How much? She asked. For what? To fix this. I'm not taking money from my contractor. I'm not trading labor either. That becomes confusing. Ruth opened the file. $25 an hour. Too low. You haven't seen whether I'm good. I saw your renovation notebook. They agreed on 30. Ruth spent the afternoon at the folding table, sorting invoices, receipts, mileage records, supplier accounts, and estimates. The work was familiar in a way the house was not. Numbers did not resent being placed in the correct column. Dates did not accuse her of coldness. She found 2 clients who had not been billed, 1 duplicated material charge, and 3 expenses Tessa had paid personally without recording. Tessa stood behind her, reading the cleaned ledger. You did this for your husband? She asked. For our household, sometimes his business when he got behind. Did he pay you? Ruth looked up. Tessa nodded. Thought so. It was our money. Still your work. Ruth turned back to the ledger. Frank worked hard. I didn't say he didn't. That evening, Tessa handed Ruth $60 in cash. Ruth tried to refuse it. No, Tessa said. We agreed. It feels ridiculous. You're repairing my house. And you're repairing my books. Organizing, repairing. Ruth accepted the money. After Tessa left, Ruth put $40 in an envelope marked house and $20 in her handbag. Then she carried Frank's mug from the bedroom to the folding table and poured herself coffee. For the first time since his death, the work in front of her belonged entirely to her. Ruth's first paycheck from Tessa's business bought a shower curtain that did not resemble construction material. It was white with blue leaves. Marisol helped her hang it, then stood in the bathroom doorway judging the utility sink. That sink could wash a medium-sized dog, she said. I don't have a dog. You could acquire one. I have a house that requires feeding. The plumbing work had consumed more than expected after the crack section near the street began leaking. Tessa showed Ruth the damp soil before authorizing anything, then stood beside her while the plumber explained the repair. He's telling the truth, Tessa said afterward. I know. You looked at me. I wanted to see if you knew. Tessa shook her head. You're a terrible client. I pay promptly. You're an excellent, terrible client. The back addition was dry now. Damaged framing had been replaced, the roof patched, and the walls closed with plain plywood until Ruth could afford insulation and finished plaster. Tessa left the floor exposed and the room empty. It smelled of cut lumber instead of mold. Ruth kept the door shut anyway. The front rooms changed more slowly. The oak floors remained blotched where wet carpet had lain. The kitchen cabinets were still yellow. A used refrigerator from an appliance warehouse cost more than Ruth believed any used object should cost, so she postponed it and kept food in 2 coolers. Daniel solved the problem without warning. His van pulled into the driveway on a cold Saturday morning. He opened the rear doors and revealed a white refrigerator strapped upright between toolboxes. Compressor was replaced last year, he said. Customer remodeled and wanted stainless. Ruth touched the handle. How much? Nothing. I'm not taking it for nothing. Then give me the old one. There is no old one. Perfect. We're even. Earl appeared at the fence before Daniel had unloaded the dolly. Morning, he said. Daniel looked at him. You the neighbor? I was until this truck blocked my view. Your view is my mother's garage. Exactly. Scenic. They moved the refrigerator together while arguing about whether the back step could support it. Tessa had reinforced the step, but Daniel insisted on laying a sheet of plywood over it. Earl insisted the plywood would slide. Ruth stood in the kitchen until both men looked at her for a ruling. Use the front door, she said. The refrigerator fit through the front door with less than an inch to spare. Daniel connected the water line only after Ruth promised never to use the ice maker until the kitchen plumbing was permanently finished. When the motor began humming, the house sounded occupied. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag. It's coming along. You said it was beyond repair. I was wrong. Ruth waited for pain or victory. What she felt was smaller than either. He walked through the dining room and looked toward the sealed back section. Tessa had removed the containment plastic, but a temporary door still separated the unfinished addition. What are you doing back there? Nothing until spring. You could make it a nice primary suite. I already have a bedroom. Add a bathroom, French doors to the yard. This neighborhood's improving. You visited once. I looked up sales. A renovated one 2 blocks over went for $198. I paid $45. Exactly. Daniel's face brightened with the energy he brought to other people's possibilities. Put another 50 into it, you've got real equity. Equity is where the walls are. I intend to keep them. I'm just saying you made a good investment. I made a place to live. It can be both. He was not wrong, which annoyed her. Ruth made coffee while Daniel examined the cabinets. He suggested replacing rather than repainting them, then opened one and saw the original dark wood beneath layers of paint. These might be worth stripping. Your father said stripping paint was punishment for sins committed in a previous life. Dad hated sanding. Your father hated many things he was paid to do. Daniel smiled. For a little while, they spoke about Frank without using him as evidence. When Daniel left, he hugged Ruth and asked whether the refrigerator settled what he owed her. The question was delivered as a joke. Ruth did not laugh. No. His arms loosened. I'm grateful for the refrigerator, she said. The loans are separate. I know. Do you? He stepped back. I was kidding. I have spent a lot of money pretending jokes were not requests. The warmth went out of his face. Enjoy the refrigerator, Ma. Ruth watched him leave and wished she had allowed them 10 more pleasant minutes. Then she was angry at herself for counting pleasant minutes as something Daniel gave her. On Monday, she went to the bank. A woman with red glasses helped her remove Daniel as beneficiary from a savings account containing $26,000. Ruth named Claire and Daniel equally on the account, holding the remainder of her reserve, but she moved the smaller account into her name alone, with no payable on death designation. You can always change this later, the banker said. I know. Would you like to name another beneficiary? Not today. The decision did not feel like revenge. It felt like moving a chair away from a doorway people kept walking through without knocking. At the house, Tessa had spread cabinet doors across sawhorses. You approve this? She asked, holding a scraper. Depends on what it costs. I'm testing one. If the wood is good, I'll tell you how many hours. If it's bad, we paint. What color? Not yellow. You're very controlling. I have limits. They found maple beneath the paint, scarred but sturdy. Restoring every door would take too long, so Tessa showed Ruth how to apply a safer stripping gel and scrape without gouging. Ruth's wrist had healed, but Tessa limited her to 1 door at a time and made her wear gloves. The work was slow and unpleasant. Yellow paint softened into sticky curls. White paint remained stubborn beneath it. Ruth's shoulders ached after 40 minutes. Yet each finished patch revealed grain that had been hidden for decades. Marisol came after her shift, took one look, and asked for gloves. Earl refused to participate on the grounds that he had already suffered enough in life, then spent an hour removing hardware at the table. They worked with the radio playing old soul songs from Tessa's van. Marisol sang every lyric incorrectly. Tessa corrected her until Ruth pointed out that Tessa's version was also wrong. "You both need hobbies," Earl said. "We have one," Marisol replied. "Judging you?" By evening, 3 cabinet doors were bare. Ruth cooked chili on the hot plate and served it from the folding table. There were only 3 chairs, so Tessa sat on an overturned bucket. Everyone brought something. Marisol brought cornbread, Earl brought beer, and Tessa produced 4 spoons from her van because Ruth owned only 2. The house was still ugly. The dining room had no baseboards. The bathroom sink looked industrial. Wind found the loose corner of the front window and whistled. Ruth had not enjoyed a meal so much in months. Claire called afterward. Ruth carried the phone into the bedroom, though nobody remained to overhear. "How was the wreck?" Claire asked. "Warm. I saw the photo Daniel sent." "What photo?" "Your kitchen. He said you got a refrigerator. He brought it." Claire paused. "That was nice?" "Yes. You sound surprised." "I'm trying not to be." Claire told Ruth about her new office, the longer commute, and a neighbor whose barking dog had become the central tragedy of the street. Ruth listened. Neither mentioned the trusted contact change or the storage payment. At the end, Claire said, "I'm glad you have heat. Thank you." It was the closest they had come to peace. The call from Daniel arrived 4 days later at 9 in the evening. Ruth knew before answering. She could tell by the hour. Daniel called with good news during the day, when it could be admired properly. Trouble came after dark. "I need to talk to you," he said. "About what?" "Can I come over?" "You're already driving." He did not deny it. When he arrived, he looked exhausted. His work shirt was untucked, and there was a fresh crack across the screen of his phone. He declined coffee and paced through the dining room while Ruth remained seated at the folding table. "2 commercial clients haven't paid," he said. "One restaurant owes me $11,000. The hotel contract was supposed to cover payroll, but they delayed the renovation. How much do you need?" He stopped pacing. Ruth had learned that direct questions shortened performances. 20,000 would stabilize everything, he said. 15 might. "I don't have 20,000 to give you. I'm not asking you to give it. It would be a loan. You still owe me 12 from the last 2. That money went into the business. That is what you said when you borrowed it. I've paid you when I could. You paid me $800 in 3 years. Daniel sat across from her. The business has value. Equipment, accounts, the van. Then borrow against them. Banks don't understand seasonal cash flow. I suspect banks understand cash flow, not small business. Tessa owns a small business. She invoices promptly, separates personal expenses, and does not borrow from her mother. He stared at her. "Who's Tessa?" "My contractor." "Your contractor is discussing finances with you?" "I do her books." Daniel laughed once, without humor. "Of course you do. What does that mean?" "You buy a wreck, hire strangers, and suddenly they're your new family." The accusation hurt because part of it felt true. "They don't ask me for $20,000, Ruth said. "They haven't known you long enough." Ruth folded her hands to stop them shaking. "No. Ma, listen to me. I have. If I miss payroll, my techs walk. Once they walk, I lose the service contracts. I could lose everything over a temporary gap. I am sorry. I don't need sorry. I need a bridge loan." "No." His chair scraped backward. "You have the money. I have a repair reserve and savings to live on. You're 74. What are you saving it for?" The room went silent. Daniel heard himself. His face changed, but he could not pull the words back. Ruth looked toward the kitchen, where his refrigerator hummed steadily. "That," she said, "is the question I asked when you wanted me to spend it on assisted living. This is different. Yes. This time, you would get the money. I'm your son, and I am your mother, not your bank." He stood. "You're choosing this house over me. I'm choosing not to disappear so you can postpone consequences. You'd rather pour money into rotten walls. The walls have stopped asking." Daniel's eyes filled, which made Ruth's own anger harder to hold. He grabbed his jacket. "When the next thing goes wrong here, don't call me. I didn't call you for the last thing." He left without slamming the door. That restraint somehow hurt more. Ruth sat alone until the furnace stopped, rested, and began again. On the folding table lay one cabinet hinge Earl had forgotten. Ruth picked it up, though there was nowhere it needed to go. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, a kindness delivered before the price had been named. The refrigerator became an accusation by morning. Ruth opened it for milk and saw the shelves Daniel had scrubbed before delivery. He had replaced a cracked drawer with one from another model, trimming the edge so neatly she had not noticed. A strip of white tape inside the door read, "Filter changed October 22nd" in his handwriting. Kindness did not cancel entitlement. Entitlement did not make the kindness false. Ruth closed the door harder than necessary. Daniel did not call. Claire did, though she pretended the call was about Thanksgiving. "I'm not hosting," Ruth said. "I didn't ask you to. You were circling. I thought I might come there." "To the house? That is where you live." Ruth waited for the criticism hidden in the sentence. None arrived. "My dining table is folding," she said. "I remember. One chair is a bucket. I'll bring a chair." "You're driving 700 miles with a chair? I own a car with seats already in it." Ruth smiled despite herself. Claire heard it. "I thought I could come Wednesday and leave Friday," Claire said, "unless you have plans." Ruth had plans. Marisol had invited her to Thanksgiving at the diner after closing, where staff and several regular customers gathered around tables pushed together. Earl had been assigned sweet potatoes, despite claiming he did not know how to make them. Tessa said she might attend if spending the day alone began to feel more ridiculous than peaceful. "You can come with me to Marisol's," Ruth said. "Who is Marisol?" "The waitress who told me about the house." A pause. "And Tessa is the contractor whose books you do." "Yes. Daniel said you replaced us." Ruth sat down at the folding table. "Daniel said many things. He told me you refused to help him. He asked for $20,000, 15, according to him. That was his optimistic number. I'm not saying you should have given it." "You're not?" I said, "I'm not saying it." Claire's precision sounded like progress. Ruth explained the unpaid accounts, the missed payroll Daniel feared, and the $12,000 he already owed her. Claire listened without interrupting. "He asked me for 10, Claire said. Ruth closed her eyes. "Did you give it to him?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I just moved, and because he owes me 6 from last year." Neither had known about the other's loan. For a moment, they were not allies. They were two women discovering they had been privately assigned different branches of the same emergency. "He asked you after I said no," Ruth said. "Before, I think." "That's worse." "Yes." Claire sighed. "He always sounds so close to fixing it." "Because he is. Close has lasted 15 years. You helped him make it last. So did you. I learned from you." The remark was quiet, not cruel. Ruth looked toward the cabinet doors lined along the dining room wall, each one half stripped. "I suppose you did," she said. Thanksgiving plans remained unsettled. Claire would come, possibly. She needed to check work. Ruth said that was fine too quickly, and Claire noticed. "Do you want me there?" "Yes." "Even if I hate the house?" "You haven't seen it." "I have seen mold photographs. The mold is gone. Then I'll find something new. That I believe." Tessa finished the bathroom wall the following week. She also replaced the rotten porch column base and secured the loose gutter before freezing weather. Each completed repair uncovered something smaller: a damaged outlet behind a cabinet, a cracked vent, a window sash painted shut. None threatened the house. Together, they consumed money with excellent manners. Ruth's bookkeeping work expanded. Tessa began arriving with coffee and a fresh stack of invoices every Monday. Ruth created numbered job folders, a mileage log, and a simple system for tracking deposits against materials. "You were undercharging for project management," Ruth said. "I removed it because clients complained. Clients complain about rain. Rain is free. Not after it enters a wall." Tessa raised her rates on 2 new estimates. Both clients accepted. She paid Ruth for every hour. Ruth placed half into the house envelope and spent the other half on groceries, a second-hand dining chair, and a lamp for the front room. Earl repaired the lamp's frayed cord after announcing that whoever had donated it was trying to kill her. Marisol brought a small round table from her basement. Its top was scratched and one leg shorter than the others. "It has character," Marisol said. "It limps. So do half the people who will sit at it." The bungalow accumulated objects with histories Ruth had not chosen. Tessa's extra spoons, Earl's fire extinguisher, Marisol's table, Daniel's refrigerator. Her old furniture remained in storage because moving it would cost money and expose it to construction dust. Ruth discovered she did not miss most of it. She did miss Frank's chair, The brown recliner had been ugly when they bought it and worse after 20 years. Frank had worn a pale curve into each arm. At Claire's house, the chair had remained in storage because Claire said it dominated a room. Ruth arranged for movers to bring it with her dresser and kitchen boxes. Tessa objected. "We're sanding tomorrow. It can stay in the bedroom. Dust will get under the door." It survived Frank's boots. Frank's boots weren't airborne particles. Ruth put the chair in the bedroom. The sanding created more dust than Tessa predicted. Plastic covered the doors, the air scrubber returned, and Ruth wore a mask, but fine powder settled everywhere. It coated Frank's mug, clouded the bedroom mirror, and slipped beneath the sheet covering the recliner. Ruth developed a cough. At first it was dry and occasional. Marisol blamed dust. Tessa blamed Ruth for ignoring instructions to leave during sanding. Ruth blamed the cold air. "You're wheezing," Tessa said. "I've always had a little wheeze." "No, you haven't. How would you know? I spend more hours in your house than you do." Tessa stopped work for the afternoon, opened the front windows, and replaced the filters. Ruth objected to both the delay and the cold. "Go to Marisol's," Tessa said. "I'm not leaving. Then sit on the porch. It's 46 degrees. You were comfortable living here without heat. I was making a point. You made it. Put on a coat." Ruth sat on the porch wearing the winter coat Claire had mailed back without a note. By evening, the cough had deepened. She took aspirin, made tea, and slept badly in Frank's chair because lying flat tightened her chest. The next morning, Tessa found her there. "No work today," she said. "I'm not working, I mean me. That's unnecessary. You have a fever. You cannot diagnose fever by looking." Tessa pressed the back of her fingers to Ruth's forehead. "I can diagnose stubborn by listening." Marisol drove Ruth to urgent care. The physician said the irritation from dust had likely made her more susceptible to a respiratory infection. Her lungs were clear enough to avoid the hospital, but she needed medication, rest, clean air, and someone checking on her. "I have people," Ruth said before Marisol could. Marisol looked at her, then nodded. Tessa sealed the dining room and suspended work. Earl brought a humidifier. Marisol made broth and placed medication doses in a row on the kitchen counter, as if Ruth were likely to improvise. Claire arrived Wednesday afternoon while Ruth was asleep in Frank's chair. She woke to the front door opening and a suitcase wheel catching on the threshold. "Mom?" Ruth sat up too quickly and began coughing. Claire crossed the room in 4 steps. She looked thinner, her auburn hair shorter than before, her navy coat still buttoned to the throat. "What happened?" "Nothing. You sound like a broken accordion. Respiratory infection." "Since when?" "Monday." "Why didn't you tell me?" "You were driving today. I would have come sooner." That was the concern. Claire touched Ruth's forehead, then saw the medication on the counter. She read every label. What did the doctor say? "Rest." "Where's your thermometer?" "I don't have one." "Of course you don't." The old tone returned before Claire had been in the house 5 minutes. She walked through the rooms, opening cabinets, testing taps, and frowning at exposed trim. She found the thin line of dust along the bedroom threshold and removed Frank's chair from the room with Earl's help, though Ruth said it was fine. "The air in here isn't safe," Claire announced. Tessa stopped work. "After you got sick." "Because I got sick." "You're coming to a hotel." "No." "Then we're going to urgent care again." "I already went. I wasn't there." Ruth looked at her. The physician managed. Claire unpacked her suitcase in the front room as if preparing for an occupation. She had brought disinfecting wipes, a digital thermometer, 2 air filters, clean pillowcases, and a set of plastic food containers nested by size. "You packed for war," Ruth said. "I packed for you. They may be the same thing." Claire made soup, though Marisol's broth was already in the refrigerator. She wiped the kitchen counter, then wiped it again. She moved Ruth's medications into a plastic bin labeled morning/evening with masking tape. Ruth's fever rose after dinner. Claire sat beside Frank's chair, timing the spaces between coughs. When Ruth woke near midnight, Claire was still there, wrapped in her coat because the front room was cooler than the bedroom. "You should sleep," Ruth whispered. "So should you." "I am." "No, you're arguing with your eyes closed." Claire helped her drink water. Her hands were gentle. Ruth remembered those hands packing towels beneath the silver gravy boat. By morning, the fever had fallen. Ruth woke to the sound of cabinet doors closing in the kitchen. She found Claire rearranging the shelves. "Put them back," Ruth said. Claire turned. I'm making room for the containers. I didn't ask for containers. You need food where you can see it. I can see my food. Your canned soup was behind cleaning supplies, for one day. And your inhaler was in the bedroom. That is where I sleep. Claire placed both palms on the counter. You cannot keep living like this. The sentence struck the exact bruise she had carried from Claire's guest room to the motel, and from the motel to number 38. I am living, Ruth said. You're sleeping in a construction site and getting sick from the walls. I got an infection, because you refuse to admit what you can't do, and you refuse to help without taking over. I drove 700 miles. I did not ask you to. Claire's face changed. Ruth heard the cruelty only after it landed, but exhaustion prevented her from softening it. Then, maybe you should have, Claire said. Maybe you should have asked what I needed before arriving with labels. I knew what you needed. That is the problem. Claire pulled the masking tape from the medication bin so hard it tore. Fine, she said. What do you need? Right now? I need you to stop moving my things. I mean generally. I don't know. That isn't an answer. It is the only one I have. Claire looked around at the unfinished kitchen, the borrowed table, the exposed floor, and the woman who had once known where every object in her daughter's house belonged. I cannot watch you prove a point until it kills you. Ruth gripped the edge of the counter. And I cannot breathe with you managing the air. Claire stood still. Leave, Ruth said. Mom, go to a hotel. Go back home. Just leave. For once, Claire did exactly what Ruth asked. She packed in silence, set the thermometer on the table, and carried her suitcase to the car. Ruth watched from behind the broad front window. Claire did not look back before driving away. The car's absence left a clean rectangle on the curb. Ruth stood at the window until another coughing spell bent her forward. By the time it passed, her eyes watered and her ribs hurt. She sat in Frank's chair, pulled the blanket over her knees, and told herself she had protected a boundary. The boundary looked remarkably like an empty room. Marisol arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a grocery bag and a face prepared for trouble. Where's Claire's car? Gone? Gone where? I suggested several destinations. Marisol set the bag on the table. You threw her out. I asked her to leave. That is the indoor version of throwing somebody out. She reorganized my cabinets. Marisol opened one. They could use it. That is not the point. I know. Ruth waited for a lecture. Marisol took the thermometer from the table, wiped it with alcohol, and handed it over. You're not going to tell me I was wrong? Would fever improve your listening? The thermometer read 99. The number was not dramatic enough to justify how miserable Ruth felt. Marisol heated broth and changed the water in Earl's humidifier. She did not mention Claire again until Ruth had finished half the bowl. Your daughter looks scared, she said. She looked controlling. People reach for the tools they have. That doesn't make them good tools. No. Ruth traced a pale scratch on the table. I told her I didn't ask her to come. Did you? No. Did you want her? Yes. Marisol nodded as though Ruth had answered correctly, which was irritating. You may leave now, Ruth said. Eat 3 more spoonfuls. I own this house. Congratulations. Eat. Claire returned at 8 the following morning. She stood on the porch without her suitcase, holding 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. Her eyes were swollen, and the same navy coat was buttoned crookedly. Ruth opened the door, but did not step aside. What do you want? She asked. Claire looked directly at her. I want to know what you want. The sentence removed Ruth's prepared defenses. I brought coffee, Claire added. I won't come in unless you ask. You drove all the way from the hotel to stand outside? It's 11 minutes. Which hotel? The Crestview. Ruth stared at her. It seemed appropriate, Claire said. A laugh escaped Ruth, then became a cough. Claire's hands lifted but stopped before touching her. Come in, Ruth said. Claire placed the coffees on the table and remained standing. What do you want me to do first? The question felt unnatural between them. Ruth had spent years answering needs before anyone named them, and Claire had learned to do the same with greater efficiency. Sit down, Ruth said. Claire sat in the mismatched chair. Ruth lowered herself into Frank's recliner. For a while, they drank coffee without speaking. Claire had remembered Ruth's order: cream, no sugar. The house looked better in morning light. It also revealed dust on every horizontal surface. I need the curtains washed, Ruth said. All right. Not the cabinet curtains, the bedroom ones. There are cabinet curtains? No, I'm establishing limits. Claire almost smiled. Bedroom curtains. And Tessa said the doorway to the dining room needs sealing before sanding resumes. I don't know how. Can I call her? Yes. Anything else? Stop looking at the bathroom as if it insulted you. Claire looked toward the utility sink. I can try. Tessa arrived an hour later, expecting conflict. She wore a mask around her neck and kept her responses to Claire short. The dust did not cause the infection, Claire said, after Tessa explained the physician's instructions. I didn't say it did. It aggravated her lungs. Yes. Was the containment sufficient? For sanding, yes. She opened the bedroom door twice. Ruth called from the recliner. Once. Tessa turned. I watched you do it twice. I closed it again. Claire looked at Ruth. Tessa crossed her arms. Your mother treats instructions as a collection of opening arguments. Claire's mouth twitched. That sounds right. Their alliance formed so quickly that Ruth objected on principle. I am still in the room. Rest, they said together. Claire helped Tessa seal the dining room entrance and carried dusty fabric to the laundromat, because Ruth's washer connection was not yet complete. She returned with the curtains folded badly, but clean. You should have dried them on low, Ruth said. I did. They've shrunk. They were 3 inches too long. They were intended to puddle. Curtains don't puddle. Water puddles. Ruth touched the hem. Thank you. Claire paused, then nodded. That afternoon, they sat on the porch while Tessa worked inside. Claire wore Frank's old canvas jacket over her sweater. The sleeves were too long, and she kept pulling her hands inside them. Dad hated this jacket, she said. He hated buying another. He wore it with a hole under the arm for 5 years. I repaired the hole. He reopened it. Your father resisted improvement. Claire looked through the front window at the unfinished room. You would have driven him crazy with this house. He would have driven me crazy first. They smiled, then lost the smile at nearly the same time. Claire tucked her hands deeper into the sleeves. I shouldn't have left you at the motel. Ruth looked toward the street. I keep saying the timing was bad, Claire continued. The timing was bad. The job changed the start date, the movers were booked, and Daniel backed out. All of that is true. Yes. But I still did it. Yes. I told myself 10 days was nothing. I told myself you'd be difficult anywhere because you were angry about selling the old house. I even thought it might force you to choose one of the residences. Ruth turned toward her. You planned that? I didn't plan it. I allowed myself to like the possibility. Honesty could be more painful than excuses because there was nothing to push against. I wanted you somewhere with staff, Claire said. Not because you needed care, because then there would be people whose job was to notice if something happened. You could call. I called constantly, to check whether I was obeying, to hear if you sounded sick or confused or lonely. I was lonely. I know. I heard it. Then why didn't you come? Claire stared at the porch floor. Because I was tired of being the one who always came. The words remained between them. Ruth's first instinct was to list everything she had done for Claire. She could name meals cooked, bills organized, office calls answered, boxes packed after the divorce. The list assembled itself with frightening speed. Claire saw it in her face. You did more for me than I asked, she said. That's the problem. How can doing more be the problem? Because there was no way to repay it. Every time I tried, you found something else I was doing wrong. I helped. You entered my house and made yourself essential. Then, if I wanted space, I felt ungrateful. Ruth looked at the clean curtain moving behind the front window. I never asked you to repay me. No, you said, after everything I've done, which was worse. When did I say that? The night I told you I was taking this job. Ruth remembered the kitchen at Claire's house, moving boxes against the wall, Claire saying the offer was too good to refuse. Ruth had asked what would happen to her. Claire had replied that they would find a solution. After everything I've done for you, you can't give me 1 month? Ruth had said it. I was frightened, she whispered. So was I. That does not excuse the motel. No. Claire did not snatch forgiveness from the admission. Ruth was grateful and resentful for that. I did it to Daniel too, Ruth said. I fixed things before he felt the full weight of them. He didn't complain. He complains now that I've stopped. You trained him well. We both did. Claire leaned back in the porch chair. He missed payroll. Ruth's stomach tightened. How do you know? He called. 2 technicians left. The restaurant paid part of what it owed, but not enough. Did you give him money? No. Is he all right? He's angry. That wasn't my question. I don't know. Ruth imagined Daniel alone in the service van, calling clients, avoiding his employees' eyes. She wanted to reach for her checkbook. Her body knew the movement. Claire watched her hands. If you give it now, she said, the only lesson he learns is to make the consequence painful enough for you. I know. Knowing did not quiet the instinct. They sat until cold air deepened Ruth's cough. Claire asked whether she should close the windows. Ruth said yes. Claire closed only the windows, touching nothing else. Thanksgiving morning began, with Marisol banging on the front door at 10. Why are neither of you dressed? Ruth looked down at her slacks. I am dressed. For eating toast. Put on something with forgiveness in the waist. Claire emerged from the bedroom carrying a serving dish. She had stayed on Ruth's mattress while Ruth slept in Frank's chair, though they had argued about the arrangement. I made sweet potatoes, Claire said. Marisol lifted the foil and examined them. Earl was assigned sweet potatoes. Then there will be two. There cannot be two. He needs to experience responsibility. At the diner, 6 tables had been pushed together beneath paper leaves taped to the windows. The closed sign faced the street. Earl stood over a pan of sweet potatoes covered with marshmallows burned black at the edges. They're caramelized, he said. They're evidence, Marisol replied. Tessa arrived late with a bakery pie and an apology she delivered only to the pie. She had changed out of work clothes and wore a dark green sweater. Without her boots and pencil, she seemed almost unfamiliar. Claire studied her. So you're Tessa? So you're Claire. Ruth braced herself. Tessa handed Claire the pie. Your mother's books saved me $1,200 this month. Claire accepted it. Her books saved my insurance office for 3 years. Their eyes met over the pie, each recognizing something the other understood differently. Then she's undercharging me, Tessa said. She always does it first. Ruth stepped between them. I can hear both of you. They took their seats. Earl ended up on the overturned bucket because he had arrived last and had not brought a chair. He claimed it improved his posture. Daniel's place did not exist. Ruth had invited him by text and received no answer. She had considered setting a chair anyway, then decided an empty place would turn absence into the guest of honor. Before they ate, Marisol asked whether anyone wanted to say grace. Earl looked at Ruth. Claire looked at Ruth. Tessa lowered her eyes. Ruth looked around the table at people who had washed her curtains, repaired her walls, brought her broth, challenged her pride, and left when she asked, even when leaving was the wrong thing. Thank you for the food, she said, and for bringing your own. Marisol waited. That is the grace. It could use some work. So could your potatoes. They began passing dishes. Claire sat beside Ruth, but did not fill her plate for her. When Ruth reached for the gravy, Claire moved the bowl closer without taking it from her hand. The difference was small enough that no one else noticed. Ruth did. Claire stayed through Sunday. She did not rearrange the kitchen again. On Friday morning, she stood beside the yellow cabinets and asked, "Which one may I ruin?" Ruth handed her gloves and a scraper. They worked at opposite ends of the dining table while sleet tapped the broad front window. Claire attacked the paint too aggressively at first, digging the scraper into the maple. Lower angle, Ruth said. Claire stopped. Are you helping or supervising? Helping. That sounded like supervising. Ruth considered the difference. Would you like me to show you? Yes. Ruth demonstrated on one corner. Claire watched, then tried again. The paint lifted in a smooth curl. Better, Ruth said. Thank you. Neither mentioned how difficult those 4 words had become. When Claire left, she took no boxes and offered no brochures. She hugged Ruth on the porch, then looked at the repaired column, the patched roofline, and the front window with its temporary weather stripping. I still hate this house a little, she said. The feeling may be mutual, but I see it. Ruth knew what she meant. Daniel remained silent. Claire heard from him twice. The appliance business had lost its hotel contract. Daniel sold one service van, let his remaining technician go with 2 weeks' pay, and returned to handling residential calls alone. Lena was still with him, though she had stopped letting him use her credit card for parts. He says everyone abandoned him, Claire told Ruth over the phone. He learned the word recently. He also says, you turned me against him. Did I? No. His request for $10,000 contributed. Ruth opened the refrigerator and looked again at the tape in Daniel's handwriting. Is he eating? He owns a refrigerator too, Mom. That wasn't an answer. He's eating. Ruth did not call him. She wrote his number on a piece of paper and placed it beside the phone, though the number was already stored there. The paper made restraint seem like a decision rather than an absence. A week before Christmas, an envelope arrived from Mercer Appliance. Inside was a check for $100. The memo line read, "Loan repayment, not refrigerator." There was no note. Ruth deposited it. She mailed Daniel a receipt showing the remaining balance. Beneath it, she wrote, "Thank you. I hope you are well. No love, no lecture, no offer." She cried after sealing the envelope and resented him for making even a payment hurt. The house entered winter unfinished, but capable. Snow collected over the new flashing without leaking into the front room. The furnace clicked on through cold nights. Tessa sealed the worst gaps around the windows, and Earl fitted a strip beneath the back door that stopped the kitchen draft. The loose gutter failed during an ice storm. It tore away from the corner above the addition and struck the siding with a metal bang at 3 a.m. Ruth woke in Frank's chair, called Tessa, then looked at the hour and hung up before the call connected. Tessa called back. "Is the house on fire?" "No." "Are you injured?" "No." "Then why are we awake?" "The gutter came loose." "Did it come inside?" "No." "Go to bed." By 9, Tessa was on a ladder in freezing rain with Earl holding the stabilizers. Ruth stood below, wearing Frank's old jacket, and received identical orders from both of them to go inside. "I can hold something," she said. "Hold coffee," Earl replied. She made 3 cups. The gutter cost $280 to reattach and brace. Ruth wrote the amount in her notebook, then crossed out the column where she had once tracked how far repairs exceeded the first estimate. The number no longer taught her anything. Her reserve was smaller. That was true. Her life was not ruined. That was also true. Tessa stopped major work until warmer weather and used the slower months to expand her business. Ruth prepared invoices every Monday and followed up on late payments every Thursday. She disliked collection calls, but proved good at them. "I'm looking at invoice 1047, she would say. "Before we discuss why you haven't paid, please confirm the work was completed." People often became less philosophical after saying yes. Tessa paid off the overdue electrical bill, bought shelving for the van, and hired Jerome for regular hours. She asked Ruth to increase her bookkeeping rate. "I set the rate," Ruth said. "You set it too low. So did you. That's how I recognize it." They settled on $35 an hour. Ruth used the difference to buy a narrow wooden desk for the east bedroom. She moved Frank's mug onto it and began keeping house money in a bank envelope inside the locked drawer instead of the paper envelope beneath her mattress. In February, Claire called before making an airline reservation. "I have 3 days off. Would you like company?" "Yes." "Do you want me to bring anything?" "Your old clothes." "Why?" "The kitchen." Claire arrived with work gloves and no food containers. She slept on a borrowed air mattress in the front room and helped Ruth strip the final cabinet doors. The work took 2 days. Their conversation started and stopped around the scrape of tools. Claire admitted she had disliked Frank's chair because it reminded her of his illness. Ruth admitted she had known and brought it to Claire's house anyway. "I thought if we avoided everything that upset us, your father would disappear twice," Ruth said. "He had already disappeared. That was my fear." Claire looked toward the bedroom, where the chair sat near the window. "I'm sorry I put it in storage. I'm sorry I made you feel cruel for needing it out of sight." They returned to scraping. On the second afternoon, Claire found Ruth's notebook open beside the sink. She did not touch it. "Are you all right for money?" she asked. "Yes, that wasn't a challenge." "I know. Can I see the numbers?" Ruth's first instinct was no. Claire waited. "Not today," Ruth said, "but I'll make a summary before you leave." "All right," Ruth did. She showed Claire the remaining reserve, monthly income, taxes, insurance, repair spending, and what could wait. Claire read every line. "You've planned for the main roof?" "Yes." "And medical expenses?" "Yes." "The back bedroom?" "Can remain plywood until it develops employment." Claire smiled. "This is better than Willow Haven. That hurts you to say." "Deeply." In spring, Tessa painted the kitchen walls a warm cream and sealed the maple cabinet doors. Their scars remain visible beneath the finish. Ruth chose simple black handles because the brass ones she liked cost 3 times more. The utility sink stayed in the bathroom. Replacing it became less urgent after Marisol brought a blue ceramic bowl for soap, and Claire found a mirror that softened the room. The porch steps were rebuilt with wider treads. Ruth paid for a simple rail, even after Tessa admitted the code did not require one at the bottom step. "Your lungs are 74, Tessa said. "So are your knees. My knees are 86. "Then we're ahead." Earl painted the rail dark green to match the awning Ruth planned to add someday. He complained the entire time that green attracted birds, then made 2 small wooden planters from leftover porch boards. Ruth planted herbs in one and marigolds in the other. The fern from the motel died despite Marisol's insistence that it was merely resting. They held no funeral. Earl placed it in his compost pile and refused to let Ruth see the remains. Summer brought heat, mosquitoes, and the discovery that the old air conditioning unit worked only when struck near the bottom left corner. Daniel would have known which part it needed. Ruth called an appliance company from the next town. She paid the bill without asking for a family discount. Another check from Daniel arrived in July, $200. The next in August was $100. He sent nothing in September. Claire reported that he was rebuilding slowly. He worked alone, kept fewer accounts, and had started requiring commercial clients to place deposits before he ordered parts. "He learned something," Ruth said. "Don't sound so astonished. I taught him many things. Apparently, consequences have clearer handwriting. Are you going to invite him?" Ruth looked around the front room. The floors had been cleaned and sealed, not refinished. A braided rug covered the darkest stain. Frank's chair sat by the broad window. Marisol's round table held a lamp, 2 unpaid invoices from Tessa's new jobs, and a bowl of apples Earl claimed were stolen by squirrels before he stole them back. The first anniversary of the closing was 3 weeks away. Ruth planned a porch supper, not a housewarming, because people had warmed the house long before its walls were finished. She wanted folding tables in the yard, strings of plain white lights, chili, cornbread, and a cake from the diner. "Invite him," Claire said. "What if he comes? Then he comes. What if he expects everything to be fixed?" Claire glanced at the imperfect floor. He may be ready to understand that fixed is not the same as erased. Ruth mailed Daniel an invitation rather than texting. She wrote the date, 5 o'clock, and "Please bring only yourself." He did not answer. The afternoon of the supper arrived warm enough for short sleeves. Claire came early and carried folding chairs from her rental car. "Where do you want these?" she asked. Ruth pointed toward the porch. 6 there, the rest under the maple. Marisol arrived with 2 large pans covered in foil. Tessa and Jerome strung lights from the porch to the garage. Earl set his sweet potatoes on the table and warned everyone they had been professionally supervised. At 4:55, Ruth checked the street. At 5, the first neighbors came through the gate. At 5:10, Marisol touched Ruth's arm. "Stop looking. I'm not. You're facing the road with your entire body." Ruth turned toward her guests. The bungalow stood behind them, pale yellow siding washed clean, front window glowing, one room still unfinished beyond its closed door. The porch did not sag. The gutter remained attached. The green rail waited beneath Ruth's hand. At 5:20, she stopped expecting Daniel. Then a familiar service van turned the corner. It was older than the one he had sold, with a dent above the rear wheel. Daniel parked across the street. For a moment, he stayed behind the steering wheel. When he finally stepped out, he was carrying Frank's old metal toolbox. Daniel crossed the street slowly, as if the toolbox were heavier than Ruth remembered. It was gray metal, dented at one corner and darkened around the handle. Frank had kept it beneath the workbench for years before giving it to Daniel with a complete set of socket wrenches and a warning not to leave good tools in the rain. Daniel stopped at the gate. The invitation said, "Bring only yourself," Ruth said. "I didn't think you meant it literally. I generally do." He looked toward the tables where Marisol was moving Earl's sweet potatoes farther from the center of the food. Claire stood beneath the maple with a stack of paper plates. Tessa remained on a ladder, adjusting the lights while Jerome told her the strand was already straight. "That's a lot of people," Daniel said. "They're loud, but manageable. I can leave." Ruth had imagined this moment often enough to distrust every version of it. In some, Daniel apologized before crossing the yard. In others, she closed the door and let him understand what abandonment felt like. Both versions had made her feel powerful and private. The man at the gate simply looked tired. "You came," she said. "Come in." Claire saw him first. She set down the plates and walked across the yard. "Hi," she said. Daniel nodded. "Hi." Claire hugged him. He held the toolbox away from her body until she released him. "You got the invitation?" she asked. "Apparently. You didn't answer. I'm aware." Marisol approached carrying a wooden spoon. "You, Daniel?" He looked at Ruth. "Marisol," Ruth said. "She found the house." Marisol offered her free hand. "I didn't find it. The house was already here. You told her about it. I have apologized to the neighborhood." Daniel shook her hand. Tessa climbed down from the ladder. Ruth introduced her and Jerome. Earl arrived last, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "You're the refrigerator," he said. Daniel blinked. "I brought the refrigerator. That's what I meant." Earl picked up the end of one folding table and asked Daniel to take the other. Daniel put down the toolbox and helped without objecting. They moved the table 3 feet toward the maple, then 2 feet back, after Marisol said they had blocked access to the food. "That woman always like this?" Daniel asked. "Only when awake," Earl said. Ruth watched Daniel take in the bungalow between tasks. His gaze moved along the repaired porch, the clean siding, and the green rail. He tested one porch step with his heel, then looked toward the roof. "You replaced the flashing," he said. Tessa did. "Main roof's still old." "Yes. That gutter needs another downspout. Tessa says it can wait." He looked at her. "Then it can wait." The sentence was so unlike him that Ruth had no answer ready. More guests arrived. Beverly brought a bottle of wine and inspected the porch as though comparing it with the listing photographs. Warren Price came carrying a bag of ice. He stood in the front room, looked at the ceiling he had once warned Ruth about, and pronounced the house less alarming. Leonard from the Crestview arrived in a purple tie despite having the evening off. Ruth introduced him to Claire. "I believe we spoke on the phone," Claire said, "several times. I'm sorry about that. You were thorough." "She was intrusive," Ruth said. Leonard considered both women. The coffee was worse. Claire laughed. The sound eased something across the yard. Daniel looked toward her, then toward Ruth, as if trying to understand how many conversations had occurred while he was gone. The front screen door banged in a gust of wind. Daniel glanced at it. "Loose closer," he said. "It has character," Ruth replied. "The top hinge is pulling out. It has more character than expected." He picked up Frank's toolbox. "Mind if I fix it?" Ruth looked at the guests settling around the tables. For years, Daniel's offers of practical help had arrived tangled with money, emergencies, or the expectation that one useful act could settle a larger debt. She could refuse now simply to prove she was capable. The screen door banged again. "Yes," she said. "Please." Daniel carried the toolbox onto the porch and opened it on the floor. Frank's tools lay inside in their familiar disorder: red-handled pliers, 2 adjustable wrenches, a stubby screwdriver, a measuring tape with black paint on one side. Daniel had added newer tools, but he had kept Frank's. Ruth knelt carefully beside him. "The screws are stripped," he said. "I need longer ones. Tessa has some in the van. I brought my own." "Your father would be astonished." Daniel smiled faintly. Dad thought preparation was an accusation. He was frequently unprepared. He was frequently accused. Daniel removed the loose hinge. Through the screen, Ruth could see Claire arranging cornbread on a platter, while Marisol rearranged it behind her. "I almost didn't come," he said. "I know." "No, you don't. All right." He selected a screw and drove it into fresh wood. "The business is smaller now," he said. "Just me. I'm renting one bay from another company instead of keeping the shop," Claire told me. Of course she did. She was worried. I didn't ask her to be. Worry rarely waits for permission. He tightened the screw, then tested the hinge. "I was angry at you," he said. "I noticed. I'm still angry sometimes." "So am I." Daniel sat back on his heels. "I thought you wanted me to lose everything." "No. You said consequences like you knew what they would be. I knew what they had to stop being." He picked up another screw but did not use it. "I asked both of you because I thought one would say yes," he said. "I didn't think of it as lying." "What did you think it was?" "Keeping options open. That is often how lying introduces itself." He nodded. Ruth lowered herself onto the porch step. Her knees protested. "I wanted to give you the money," she said. Daniel looked at her. "For days. I kept imagining you alone in the van. I thought about your employees and your contracts and Lena. I nearly called. Why didn't you? Because the pain of watching you fail was not proof that saving you would help." Daniel looked down at Frank's toolbox. "I did fail. Some of it. I lost the contracts." Yes. I lost the shop. Yes. You don't have to agree so quickly. I'm trying not to sand the edges. He gave a short laugh. Ruth continued. You also kept working. You sold what you couldn't afford. You paid your technicians before yourself. You changed how you bill. Claire told you everything. She told me enough. Daniel turned the screwdriver between his fingers. I should have done those things before. Yes, I knew you'd say that. You came anyway. He met her eyes. I'm sorry I left you at the motel. You didn't drive the car. I made sure I wasn't the one driving it. The honesty stung more than an excuse, and healed more than one, too. I am sorry I taught you that I would absorb every consequence, Ruth said. It made me feel necessary. You were necessary. I wanted to be indispensable. There's a difference. Daniel frowned. I don't know if I understand that. You don't have to today. He replaced the final screw and closed the screen door. It moved smoothly and settled without banging. I can't pay you everything at once, he said. I know. But I'll keep sending checks. I expect you to. His face tightened, perhaps at the absence of instant absolution. And the refrigerator remains a gift, he said. The refrigerator remains excellent. He closed the toolbox. Ruth touched the worn metal handle. Your father gave that to you. I thought maybe it belonged here. No, it belongs where the work is. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then left the toolbox on the porch but did not offer it again. Marisol called everyone to eat before Earl's sweet potatoes developed another skin. Ruth expected to serve. Her body prepared for it automatically. Check the drinks, find the missing forks, move the hot dishes, make sure everyone else had enough before sitting. She reached for the chili pot. Claire reached for it too, then stopped. Do you want help? She asked. Ruth looked around. Tessa was pouring drinks. Jerome carried plates. Earl had appointed himself the guardian of the cornbread. Daniel unfolded the last two chairs. Marisol was already directing traffic with the wooden spoon. Yes, Ruth said. Carry that end. Together, she and Claire moved the pot 6 feet to the table. Ruth sat before everyone had been served. The act felt almost indecent. Conversation rose around her. Beverly told Warren he had scared Ruth with his inspection. Warren claimed fear had not worked. Leonard described a motel guest who had tried to cook ribs in a toaster without violating confidentiality by explaining how. Earl insisted his sweet potatoes had been unfairly judged at Thanksgiving. They were burned, Claire said. Caramelized, Earl replied. They had a crust. Crust is where flavor lives. Daniel ate 2 servings. Tessa raised a plastic cup toward Ruth. 1 year, and only 1 contractor fired. Your standards are low, Ruth said. My standards are billable. Everyone lifted a cup, beer bottle, or coffee mug. Ruth looked down and discovered Frank's chipped brown mug in front of her. Claire must have brought it from the kitchen. To the bungalow, Marisol said. To the furnace, Warren added. To accurate invoices, Tessa said. To acceptable sweet potatoes, Earl said. No, several people replied. Daniel raised his bottle last, to Mom. Ruth met his eyes. Not for fixing everything, he added. Claire's cup remained lifted beside his. Ruth drank. After supper, Claire brought out the cake. White icing covered the top, with a small yellow house drawn in blue frosting. One side leaned lower than the other. Accurate, Ruth said. Marisol handed her a knife. Ruth cut the first slice and placed it on her own plate. No one commented. Claire smiled. The sun dropped behind the roofs across the street. Tessa switched on the strings of lights, and the porch glowed beneath them. The house's broad front window reflected the guests in fragments, Claire carrying cake, Daniel listening, while Earl explained gutter drainage, Marisol packing leftovers she would later insist she had not taken, Tessa sitting in Frank's chair, with his permission permanently unavailable. Ruth stood at the window and watched them through the glass. Beverly came beside her. It photographed terribly when we listed it. It looked terrible. Some buyers couldn't see past the damage. I saw the damage. Beverly glanced at her. And I bought it anyway. That was enough. Daniel found Ruth in the kitchen while the others began folding chairs. Can I call you next week? He asked. You can call before then. I don't know what to say. Ask whether the refrigerator still works. Does it? Yes. Good. I'll start there. He kissed her cheek. At the door, he picked up Frank's toolbox. Ruth felt an unexpected relief. Claire remained after everyone else left. She stacked plates, but did not wash them. "I can stay," she said. "You have a hotel? I can sleep here." "On what?" "The air mattress is in the car." Ruth considered the offer. "Stay tonight." Claire nodded, without treating the answer as a victory. They carried the last dishes inside. Daniel's repaired screen door closed softly behind them. The next morning, Ruth woke before Claire. East light spread across the bedroom floor, touching the sealed oak, the scarred baseboard, and the painted daisies they had decided not to cover. She put on her robe and walked through the quiet house. Leftover cake filled half a shelf in Daniel's refrigerator. The bathroom's utility sink still looked too large. The back bedroom remained unfinished behind its closed door. On Tessa's desk sat 3 invoices requiring Ruth's attention, and a note asking whether organized was a legitimate business expense. The bungalow had not become beautiful in the way Claire's brochures had promised safety would be beautiful. Its floors showed every neglectful year. Its main roof would need replacing. Ruth's savings could no longer purchase an unlimited number of mistakes. She opened the front door. The repaired screen moved smoothly. Outside, paper cups and one forgotten napkin remained on the porch. Marisol's table stood beneath the maple, damp with morning dew. Earl's planters crowded the rail, green herbs spilling over one side and marigolds brightening the other. Ruthen sat in a porch chair. Across the fence, Earl raised his coffee without speaking. Somewhere down the block, a service van started, though it was not Daniel's. Claire moved inside the house, opening one cabinet and closing it again. For 49 years, Ruth had believed love was the work that prevented other people from feeling discomfort. She had cooked before they were hungry, paid before they were desperate, forgiven before they apologized, and made herself useful before anyone could decide whether they simply wanted her. The bungalow had required something different. It had needed money, limits, judgment, and help clearly requested. It had accepted every repair without mistaking Ruth for the repair itself. Claire stepped onto the porch carrying Frank's mug. "I made coffee," she said. "Cream, no sugar. Thank you." Claire handed it over and sat in the other chair. She did not ask whether Ruth was warm enough or what needed to be done next. They watched morning move across the yard. The house behind them was sound enough to hold its scars, unfinished enough to remain honest, and quiet enough that Ruth did not have to earn her place inside it. For the first time in years, she belonged somewhere that required nothing from her but the decision to stay.